welcome to episode 2 of WoodsDog. On deck today we have Ruiz.
Raimundo Ruiz.
Raimundo Ruiz.
But my friends call me Ray, so you please call me Ray.
Ray. He started Baztec, which is an organization, right, that is trying to help the Latino community and now pretty much anybody of color to get into the world of fishing, hunting, outdoors in general. Did I get that right?
That's right, man. You nailed it. That's good.
All right. So, first of all, I want to thank you a lot.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. This is really, really cool when you reached out to me. I'm honored. So thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah. So basically,
I'm a big fan.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The way I find out about you was through a DNR coordinator, and I was trying to set up a podcast with him, and he said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And he said, "Hey, there is this person. His name is Ray. He's trying to grow the Latino community into the world of outdoors."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You should reach out to him." I was like, "Oh, okay." So then I started researching who you are, right? And I found a PBS special that they did with you.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Local PBS.
Yeah.
And then I found your YouTube channel, Baztec, and your website as well. And now you're doing a podcast. You're done, 3 episodes so far?
Yeah. We have a 4th already, recorded. And doing this is requires some editing, so we're going to release the other one shortly. So
yeah, no, it's awesome. And let's start off by talking about that PBS special, because what you said in that special, a lot of those things I had never really thought of. I had never really even known these things. And so let's talk about your life, because that's what you were talking about,
right?
In PBS,
right? The background. Well, thank you. Wow, where do I start? Oh, I guess I can start where I grew up, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, born and raised in Chicago. Both of my parents are Mexican immigrants, and my father is a construction worker for a big corporate company down there. My mom was. Just like a lot of moms, stay-at-home mom, but she also had her own career in retail.
Okay.
And the neighborhood where I grew up with was very, for lack of a better term, it was just very dangerous. So we call it in Spanish un vecindario, un barrio, un barrio, pero it's basically like the hood, the ghetto, right? But that's what during that time, during the late 80s and 90s, that's where people lived. They lived, the poor people lived in the city, in the metro area in Chicago, in the metropolitan area, and all the rich people lived on the outside, or literally downtown in the skyscrapers. But growing up there was a lot of gangs. I went to a high school. There was metal detectors. And when the thing about it, when I did the PBS special, I don't. It was a couple of years ago, right around there, and it was such a great opportunity. But I didn't get a chance to really tell that side. You know what I mean? And so I really am grateful and thank you for the opportunity to really enhance that or amplify that story more, because it's important. It's important to our community, because I'm not the only guy that has that story. When I was going to school, high school, I can't tell you how many times I got shot at. I'm a freshman or sophomore in high school. I'm walking, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, mother effer," and then all of a sudden, pop, 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 and you're like, "What's going on?" And you hear zzz, you hear bullets, man. And I'd run through a park called Eckert Park. And the reason I would go through Eckert Park is because I can see I can see everything. You know what I'm saying? So from danger, it's like when you deer, when you hunt, deer will come out of the woods and they stick just their head up and they start looking around, right? Well, I learned that through my father, but it was just instinctual for me growing up there. having everything, your peripheral vision, having that vision of where to identify danger from. And I was just a kid. No one taught me that. Mm-hmm. That's just what human beings do. We're, as hunters and gatherers, I mean, that's in our DNA, right? So with that said, I walked through school. I would get assaulted. You know, like one thing is getting shot at. The other thing is you would get assaulted by gangbangers, and it was just not one. Hey man, one on way. You get jumped by 3, 4, 5 guys. Then you still have to go to school, go through a metal detector, and perform. Think about that for a second. You were just walking peacefully, listening to Led Zeppelin or Mana, or Nirvana. I grew up in the '90s, man. You know, as a young man, so that's what I was listening to. And I can't tell you how many times I listened to a song and I'm like, I remember getting shot at, or I remember getting chased, or these guys tried to jump me while I was playing, like while the song was playing on my headphones, you know. And it's not that they're bad memories. It's just something that it was the environment. The environment was that way, and that's just for me. Now I don't deserve or want any pity from anybody. It's just a story, because there's a lot of young men and women who went through the same thing.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Not just Ray Ruiz, but a lot of my peers went through this. So they have their own stories and their own struggles. But I grew up in Chicago, graduated, and after I graduated, I had a lot of options to go to different universities, but I chose the University of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of people don't know, and maybe now the secret's out, is I always wanted to be an angler. I always wanted to be a professional angler. I wanted to be like the next, well, not the next. I wanted to be like Al Linder, like Babe Winkleman, Ron Shera, Ted Takasaki, like these guys who I watched on TV that I was like, wow.
Were they like elites in the...
They were like the Michael Jordans of fishing, the LeBron James of fishing, the Kobe Bryants of fishing, they're like, they're
the GOAT.
Yeah, they're the GOATs. Yeah, they're the Tom Brady's of fishing, and they're still around. And when they're in the room, people gravitate towards them. They're like, oh my God, Al Linder's here. And now we have the newer generations of anglers coming up, and it's just really exciting. But how I got into fishing was through my father. My father grew up in Poncitlán, Jalisco. So big shout out. Where's the camera? Right here? Yeah, big shout out to toda la raza de Jalisco, de Poncitlán. Un abrazo, un beso. Big shout out to my people out there, man. My dad called them los piconeros de Poncitlán. That's what he calls them. That's where he grew up. Donde se crió mi papá. He grew up. So did my mom. But my dad grew up with a slingshot, la resortera, and he had little rocks, little pebbles, and he would go into the field with his dog, and I believe him, and because I seen him do it when I was a kid. With a slingshot, a bird would come up and it whack, and you would see his feathers, man, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, dude.
No,
so
that's impressive.
It's incredible, man. My dad's a lot older. His eye hand coordination is not the same, so it's a little harder for him. But man, when he was my age, when he was in his 20s, with 20/20 vision, dude, he never missed, man. So my brothers and I, we got that pedigree, I guess, if you want to call it, or that DNA, and then on top of the DNA, the teachings of our father, of my dad, and he would take us out because the Chicago was very dangerous. So he would literally, on the weekends, grab your stuff, all of us, and we would go outside of Chicago. We'd go to like the Kankakee River, Fox River, all kinds of different watershed and river systems in the Illinois, outside of Chicago, Illinois, outside of the metro area, metropolitan area. So that's where I developed those skill sets, and my dad was a bobber angler. He was a live bait angler. He showed us how to set up a bobber, split it away in a hook, and he would use minnows and leeches and worms. And when I was a kid, I used to watch those TV shows, and I would watch Al Linder, and I'd see these guys, man, like they would be catching these monster walleyes and muskies and bass. Never did I see them using live bait. And I was fascinated by that. I was like, how are these guys doing that? So when I learned how to read a little better as I got older, I started getting into the magazines, reading that, and those guys were in the magazines, right? And I'm like, oh my god, these guys are amazing. And I started developing my own, like little by little, started learning a technique here. This lure does this, this does that. And I had the opportunity to, my father, as a construction worker, worked with a bunch of dudes. And a lot of them hunt and fish. And they knew my dad did that. So they invited my dad, hey, come down to Paducah, Kentucky. There's dove hunting. My dad loves dove hunting, dude. It's like you see on the show on the PBS special. We'll get to that too. I was just a kid, and we go down there and we would hunt. And we didn't have a dog, so it was me and my brother. My dad would be, blasting these morning doves, and my brother and I would pick them up, and we pick up the shells, and that was our job. And we had a 410 shotgun, one single shot. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
shotgun.
Right there.
Yeah, we would use that. That's how I started. I started with a slingshot and a 410 as a kid. My dad taught me firearm safety, and that's how it all started for me in the inception of that as a kid. With me and my brother Brian, my brother Joel, and I have a sister as well, Natalie. Shout out to them. I love you guys. And something happened when I was a little kid, and I write about it. I'm a contributor for Outdoor Life as well. I write for them once in a while, the magazine Outdoor Life.
Oh, it's a magazine?
The magazine. And they're awesome, great organization, great magazine, a great publication, I should say. And I had the opportunity to write for them, write a few things for them. And one of the things that I wrote in there was how I got hooked, pun intended, how I got hooked into fishing. And one of the things, the story that I told was when I was a kid, I remember we went to this lake. I don't know where it was, man. To this day, I don't remember. I think my dad does. I don't remember. But what I do remember is that I was using my Zepco rod and reel combination, and then I had a what they call a beetle spin. It looks like a little spinner bait, and it looks like a little grub on there. It's plastic with a lead. It was like 1/8 ounce beetle spin. It was like a purple, like June bug, and had white stripes on it, or black stripes, I think. And as a kid, I'm like, I kind of separated from my dad. I just want to kind of do my own thing, exercise my autonomy.
Yeah.
Just kind of get away from the old man and okay, let me just try this. And I saw drainage coming from the shore because we were shore fishing.
What is drainage?
A drainage was like where water from it must have rained the day or the night of, and there was water through this drain coming out into the lake from the street, from into the watershed.
Yeah.
Like a sewer drain.
Yeah.
Into flowing into the lake.
Into the lake.
Yeah, and I was like, that looks interesting. So I cast, and I'm cranking my bait back, and all of a sudden, dunk, and I set the hook, and I caught a huge bass. It was like a 3-pound bass. It looked enormous to me because I was just a kid. And that's when I really went crazy and I got obsessed, man.
Yeah.
I went nuts.
Oh, I bet. It must have been like a very joyful, like the emotions of like winning. Like I won something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I get it.
Yes, absolutely. And to land that, but what was the craziest part was my dad asked me, what you catch it on? And I told him. I said, a beetle spin. Catch one beetle spin. What's a beetle spin? And I showed it to him, and he said, you caught it with that? And I was like, yep. So that's when things kind of changed for me. And what I mean by that is like, my dad was always very supportive. But then, he was like, buying me more stuff and like, hey, mijo, son, show me this and hey, tell me more about that. He had friends down south when we would go dove hunting that had farm ponds. And they would stock those farm ponds with fish. And that's when I developed even more my tactics and techniques. Because these guys were country boys and they showed me the techniques. And that's when I first learned about the ribbon worm. It's just a worm. It looks like a ribbon. It has a tail, and when you throw it out, it just kind of does this. it just looks like it's swimming. It's beautiful. It's very elegant bait. It's a soft plastic bait, a ribbon worm.
Okay.
And that's what professional anglers in the 70s were using to win tournaments. That and crankbaits. Because there wasn't the industry is way different now, man, than it was back then. Baits were very limited because of the technology. The manufacturing was a lot less than it is now. Now you go to a store, dude, and you want to buy a ribbon worm. Man, they got like 80 colors, 100 different sizes, and then what kind of hook do you want with it? Oh my God, it's crazy, man.
No, it's very overwhelming.
It can be 100%,
especially for somebody who hasn't done fishing, and like my first time buying my own equipment, went in and I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I'll grab this, I'll grab that, I'll grab that, and then I asked one of the guys. This was at Fleet Farm. I asked one of the guys, hey, you think this would be good for crappies? And he's like, no, that's like totally what you shouldn't buy. But let me get you to this guy who loves fishing.
Sure.
And he'll help you find stuff. So they got this guy who was from Canada.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, yeah, I'll get you this, get this, get this. And like, that should be good enough. Cause, like,
get you started. Just something to get you started. Yeah. Yeah, and it is. And that's one of the reasons. And I'm so happy, again, very happy and honored to be here. Because these kind of platforms help folks that are just starting into fishing, and I know you're big into hunting as well, and you're big into outdoors and firearm safety and firearms and shooting sports, which is great, which is one of the #1 sports in high school, believe it or not, right? Oh yeah, shooting sports, clay pigeon shooting, all that. It's like that's up there with like football.
Oh,
hockey.
wow.
Oh yeah, man.
I did not know that. That's
dude, it's crazy. It's like how like Remington and like what is it? Federal. Like you'll see them all over the high schools, like sponsoring. Oh, it's unbelievable, man. Like yeah, you should have some of those high school kids on your show, like a team or having a couple. Like maybe reach out to them and get like a state champ or number 2 or whatever. And what's really cool about it is it's gender neutral, man. You don't have to be a dude or whatever, however you identify. It doesn't matter. What matters is your accuracy. That's it. Gender, it doesn't have anything to do with it because you're not lifting something heavy.
Nope.
You know, it's about your hand-eye coordination and your practice.
Practice. Yep.
You know, I it would be great, and I'm gonna try it. If you need help with that, I'd be happy to assist. You know, I'll reach out to some folks in the community.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Going back to Chicago, though.
Yeah.
What part of Chicago did you grow up in?
So I grew up just west of Cabrini Green, and it's called the near north side, right off of the 1200 block of Ogden Avenue. So like, give you a bigger intersection, like Chicago Avenue and Ashland.
Ashland sounds familiar. Yeah. What's the closest freeway?
I believe that would be
55.
The 55 is to the south. You're talking about, I think that's the Kennedy.
Yep, that's the Kennedy.
Yeah. So we're the Dan Ryan, right? 94, right by you know where the Bulls play, the United Center. I was just west of there, so not very far. Like right there, man. That's where I grew up. You know, as a kid.
Okay, I'm trying to picture exactly because I've been to Cicero. I know where Englewood is. I got lost there once.
Oh, Englewood.
Yeah, I was.
I'm gonna pull it up on the map on here to show you, but please continue. I'm just gonna put my parents' address so you can see where I grew up.
Yeah, I was driving. I was like, yeah, I'm going to my aunt's house, and I felt pretty confident that I knew where I was going. That I turned off the GPS, and all of a sudden I start seeing. Oh, okay. Okay, there's Highland Park, Schaumburg.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm seeing the demographics changed. The
neighborhoods were different.
Yep. So the busted windows on the police department. The train tracks full of a lot of people in there, and all of a
Right.
sudden I'm like, okay.
You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What? And dude, Chicago's very like, it used to be very segregated
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. Back when like Al Capone used to live there, you had certain communities to the north, other communities to the south, other communities of color to the west. Well, you can't go east because that's the lakefront. So that's it was. So it was actually very limited where people lived, especially people of color. You know what I mean? So that's just we can go down that rabbit hole, man. But yeah, that's a different conversation for a different day.
No, I find it very interesting, especially with Chicago, because I do know about the violence. I had some distant cousins who were killed.
I'm sorry to hear that, man.
One of them, and I never really met him, but one of them was killed in 2003, I think. He was shot, and he was involved in gangs. Everybody there
Sure.
was involved in gangs, and so one of them gets shot, and then the brother goes out, disappears for like 3 days, and then he comes back, and God knows what happened.
Or what he did, what kind of revenge he got into.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
And so yeah, he was killed in a drive-by, and then the next one was killed about a decade ago, I want to say. And it was a stabbing, and my understanding it was due to drug territory.
Sure.
So yeah, and then they had a sister, and I don't know what the sister became, but eventually their mom moved out of there, and they were like just got out of the neighborhood. But the thing about there is that they have a saying that goes "Eres o te mueres." Did you ever hear that?
It's like Pablo Escobar. What does he say? Something plata o plomo.
Yeah.
Plata o plomo. You either take my bribe or you take a bullet in somewhere in your body.
And for the
Yeah.
gang, so "Eres o te mueres," that's a Spanish term for
You
basically saying you either become one of us or you choose a side, or if
or you're against us, basically. You're
or-
not with us. You're against us.
Yeah. Or if you're alone, you got nobody to protect you.
Right.
Or
You
yeah.
got- yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I'm assuming that maybe because you were more of you did not get involved in that, people
Correct.
targeted you and were like, yeah, like we're just gonna
Yeah.
take shots at this kid.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you were in a gang,
Right.
you would have been under more protection because they're like, yeah, we're not gonna screw with this guy,
Because
otherwise,
he's with these other guys.
and they're gonna come after us,
Right.
and
Right. No, that's a great point.
so that's the way I see life in the inner cities, especially places like Chicago. And so what I find really interesting is that the way your dad used the outdoors. So basically, with like hunting, right? To me, it's a type of violence.
It
when,
is.
when you kill an animal, but it's also violence that got you out of worse violence.
Correct.
So-
You're right.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, that's interesting perspective. Yeah, you're right.
we have been hunters and gatherers for thousands of years,
Thousands. Yeah.
and all of a sudden, you have these places where people just don't experience the outdoors. I don't know what's up with the inner cities. I have my own theories on why like people turn out to be more, or a lot of people turn out to be like more crazy, or you see a lot of drugs in the inner cities. You see a lot of these
Right.
problems.
Right.
But then you couple it with what your dad did, and it's like, damn, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And to me, that's a success story.
Well, I appreciate that.
I think you should do a podcast with your dad.
I am. We plan on
Working
it.
on it.
Yeah, we're gonna. Maybe we'll do it in the spring. He loves coming here. And my parents just left, and they were here, and we spent some good quality time. And it's funny because they usually will stay with me. I hate to say it, but I love my parents, but they drive me a little crazy. Sometimes and they have a dog. He drives me crazy. He's like trying to kill squirrels and chasing mice, and he's just a maniac. He's a good dog. Like your dogs are great too, by the way. But it would be a great opportunity to really capture that, and maybe both my parents. I don't know. Maybe both of them would.
Yeah.
That would probably be a really really cool podcast.
Yeah, because that's your mom from my understanding, it's very similar to like pretty much any mom in a Hispanic community,
Correct.
Latino community, where it's
Yes.
like she's in charge of raising the kids in a way. And at least for like my mom, she was like more, you're gonna raise the kids. And you can. She was a tailor. She did
Seamstress, tailor,
seamstress,
yeah.
seamstress. And but her main job was to take care of the kids.
Yeah, that's a hard job, man.
And, yeah.
You know, it's funny, man. I'm glad you brought that up because I talk to my dad a lot of times, and he's like, I said, hey, Dad, because my dad was a construction worker, and he would be 40 floors up, and literally in the windy city, like it's really dangerous work, man. I worked with my dad. I know, trust me, I know firsthand how dangerous that work is. And I said, Dad, how come you never you ever think about swapping positions with Mom? He's like, hell no. You know how hard that job is to deal with you little, little, this and that, you guys and stuff. And so shout out to all the women, all the parents out there that stay home, because that is a hard ass job.
Mm-hmm.
It's a necessary job, and I don't think some parents get enough credit, because it's like, oh, you just take care of kids. No, man, it doesn't work like that. You're raising, you're educating, you're evolving these human beings to be productive members of society. Some parents don't want their kids to go to school. They're like, well, we're going to teach you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're going to feed you. We're going to do
Homeschooled.
Yeah, homeschooled, man. And I think that's wonderful. So big shout out to them, and I hope I hope that they get more recognition than they do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So Chicago, and you were going out to Kentucky.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's where we, we would go down there, and it was an outdoors person paradise, because you're outside, and this might be controversial what I'm going to say, and it's not really, I don't know, it's just words, but people are like, oh man, that's just you what's the word? For example, I don't look at, when I put a projectile through an animal, I harvest the animal. I don't kill it. People are gonna be like, oh man, you're just using semantics. I'm like, yeah, probably. But I harvest it because I take it from the earth. Just like many human beings used to take the hide, make clothing out of it, take the bone, make jewelry and knives out of it. My dad, when we harvest deer, we use a lot of the deer. We eat all of it. Have you heard of a thing called a riata? What they whip horses with? Like, let's go.
Yep.
So when they harvest a deer, they cut off the legs, right? And you have the hoof, right? So they'll dry some salt, and they'll put leather at the end so they can use it as a whip.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's, my uncle used to make that. So nothing went to waste. And that's what I mean by harvest, because you're taking the animal and it's used in all these different ways. Then you take the harvest and you share it with your community, right? How many times you're gonna eat if you harvest 2 deer, are you gonna eat all of it in 1 year? Probably, maybe not. That's a lot of meat, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. So what do? You give it away. You have people over. You share your bounty with people, and that's what brings. That's what community means, and that's what that's what I like, and that's what in my mind I'm like, yeah, people are like, well, you still killed it, man. I'm like, fine, but to me it's always a harvest,
Mm-hmm.
because it not that I don't care about it sounding good, because it's not about that. It's about my ability to share my bounty, the harvest, with the rest of the people in my community.
Yeah. Connecting to Mother Nature.
Yes.
Harvesting, connecting to, yeah. 'Cause obviously, you don't go in just to kill an animal, and the majority of hunters are not.
No.
That's not the point. The point is the trip, right? The experience, and obtaining this thing that Mother Nature has
Right.
provided. We're taking it away from Mother Nature. Thank you very much.
Right.
And now we're gonna use all of it. And that perspective of sharing it with the community, get to see that a lot with the hunting community.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, a lot of the programs, well, a lot of folks may or may not know this, but when hunters, they provide a tremendous amount of funding for outdoor stuff. Because you think about it, when you buy a license, that money is allocated. You buy ammo, it's taxed. Pittman Robertson dollars, that's money that's reallocated. You buy a firearm, tax, money reallocated. A fishing rod, hooks, weights, all that, and that's just well, you can even go back just to hunting, clothing, your sites, everything is taxed, and that money goes to conservation.
Mm-hmm.
So the people, the folks that are in that community that invest in that, those are the folks that really, like, literally invest in nature because of how that money is taxed and how it's used.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I believe it's the number one source of funding towards
Correct.
conservation.
100%. And there are folks out there that, you know, and we're not here to point fingers or anything like that. I wish there was more of a dialogue like this, so we can talk and say, here's what we do, here's how we do it, here's how the funding is being used, here's how we give back to the community, here's how we give back to we are stewards of conservation, and we give back to the outdoors. Mm-hmm. You know, as opposed to like you kill Bambi, you son of a, you know, like,
yeah.
That's not nice. That's not a nice thing. That's not dialogue. That's pointing the finger. Why don't you say, hey, can you tell me about why you hunt? Hey, just ask somebody, hey, why do you hunt, man?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a really good conversation. Trust me.
Yeah. In America, here in the United States, that model works amazing, and it's probably one of the best models in the world for conservation.
100%. 100%. Fishing, the same thing.
I can't think of any other model anywhere else in the world that has done something like that. Because I know in Africa, a lot of areas where certain animals, certain species are experiencing extinction, it's a very, very similar system that they have down there, where hunting is providing money for the
revitalization, right?
Yeah,
Revitalization
exactly.
of that animal, or that community. Dude, there was a guy who went down there to, I forgot what he was hunting, and they charged him. I mean, this guy is wealthy, man. You got to be wealthy to do something like that. His license, just his license was like, $20,000-$30,000.
Wow.
Just the license, man. That's not the guide. That's not where he's gonna stay. That's not the ammo. I mean, that's none of that. It's just literally just a license.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, wow, man, that guy's got some money. You know, but you're right. They get back into that particular community, and I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great thing for sure. So back when you were a child, then, remember you mentioned in your podcast that you went to. It wasn't your podcast, in the Spanish one.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, because just to be clear, we have two. We have a BIPOC Fishing Outdoors podcast, and then we have Pescando con Baztec. So we have a fishing podcast in Spanish only, so two separate ones.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So in the Spanish one, you mentioned that you went to Mexico, and you noticed how people fish in Mexico.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. So, I was just a kid. My dad. We went to El Lago de la Laguna de Chapala in Jalisco, Mexico, it's basically like Lake Mille Lacs. It's just in a huge valley. It's like this huge valley, so you have to go up the mountain, and when you get to the summits of the mountain, then you see the lake, and it's enormous. I was like, wow. Then you have to go down the mountain. You got to go down the mountain. It's really cool, man. It's really, really cool. Lago Chapala. And I remember being really excited. I couldn't even sleep the night before. I was so excited to, get out and do some fishing. And my dad, I remember I brought my fishing pole, or somebody lent me a fishing pole. I brought it. It was a 2-piece pole. It might have been my Zepco 404, what I usually had when I was a kid. I was like 9 years old, 10 years old, maybe right around there. And my dad's like, "You're not gonna need that." And I'm like, "Oh, come on, Dad." He's like, "All right, all right." He's like, "I'm just letting you know, they fish a little different down here, And I was like, "I can show these guys what's up." And I'm just a kid, I don't know anything. So we get to El Pueblo. There's so many small little like villages within that community. It's enormous. It's enormous. So there was a guy there, and I think he's still alive. I think he's like 100 and some years old. His name is Eplutarco. I'll say his name one more time. Eplutarco.
Okay.
The dude is like, when I met him, he was like 90 something. Like, well, I was an adult then. This is years ago. This must have been 15 years ago. And he was like at 95. So I don't know what he is now. He could be 110 if he's still alive. I think he's still alive. That's what my dad told me. Wow. And this guy's in great shape. Unbelievable human being. But so we get to the town, and then these guys, my dad's compadre says, "Hey, these guys will take you fishing with your son." They're guys from the town. They're local fishermen. So we jump on the boat with those guys, and here I am with my rod and reel, and I'm putting on bait. And I'm like, I'm going to use my June bug. I'm going to use my spinner bait. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to do this and that. And I'm in the boat, right? I'm in the boat, bro. And I'm looking around, and I don't see fishing rods. That's the first thing I noticed. Excuse me. I didn't see any fishing rods. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I said, what are these guys doing? How are they going to catch fish? Then I saw a bunch of nets in there. And I thought that were just nets. So when you have your rod, you net the fish, right?
Yep.
That's normally how you do it here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
I come to realize that I was a young fool. So this guy gets up, right? He was a young dude. He's probably in his 20s. He gets up at the bow of the boat, like Daniel-san in Karate Kid. And he grabs what they call an atarraya. You know what atarraya is? The nets, una atarraya.
Oh, okay.
And he goes, and he starts pulling it in. And I just see boiling. Just a tremendous amount of fish, man. I was like, oh my God. I was like, one throw of the net, he had all these fish. And I was like, okay, this is different, man. This is a different kind of fishing. And then they had like these, lines where they had segments, and on these lines they would have hooks with just bait, sable, which is bait. And they would have segments, and they have buoys connected. I don't know if they're called trout lines or something like that. I don't know what I forgot the name. They have a name for them, a term for them. But they had markers in the middle of the lake, and they would just grab the line, pull it up, and there's hooks, like 18 inches apart, hooks, and there's fish on them. They would pull the line up, and they would just take the fish out and put it in the boat. Never used a fishing rod. And here I am. I'm sitting there. I'm like, I was embarrassed. I was like, I can't use this. I can't catch anything with this. This is a different kind of fishing. So that's when I knew culturally that, there's this American kid trying to fish with a rod and reel, and then there's another culture that they don't fish for sport. They fish to eat, to harvest, to take care of their families. And it was really, really cool experience and really enlightening for me, because I was like, I came back to the States with a different perspective, a perspective of like, man, like, that's a hard life. That's tough. And if you don't catch fish, you don't eat. You can't feed your family.
Yep.
So it was really interesting. It was really, really interesting. At a young age, it was really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's That's a very interesting perspective. When I back in 2007, I went to Mexico, and I went to a town that's a fishing town.
Hmm.
Fishing town slash not really a fishing town, but a lot of the people go out and they catch shrimp.
Oh yeah.
And similar to what you're saying, we go there and we went to the locals people's beach. And when we got there, it's like it's empty. We got the beach to ourselves. Beautiful area.
You're like, where's everyone at? Right? Like, where's everyone?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like going to Galveston or Manzanillo. Right. It was just us, the family, and we were fishing, and the fishing there was just so much fun there. But yeah, same thing. It was the locals do not go to the beach. It's like, well, I mean, they do go, but it's not the like the tourists do, right? Like when they go to Cancun or whatever. Right. It's more of a it's there. It's normal for us, but the beach is used for going out and getting shrimp. And we gotta feed the families.
Yeah, this is our livelihood.
Yep.
Yeah, and they respect it. They keep it clean.
Mm-hmm. It was very clean.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
The only thing about that beach was that there was a spot they told us to stay away from, because when you get into the water, there are holes, and you can fall into the hole and like can't really swim out of it.
Oh so my God.
That's one thing they were like, yep, just stay away from that area, and then just as long as you just don't cross this area, then you'll be fine.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Yeah, you see a lot of cool stuff. We went to Puerto Vallarta when we were kids, and my parents we were because it's in Jalisco and Puerto Vallarta, so we went there, and I remember going fishing with my dad, and we caught red snapper or huachinango, which is red snapper, and that's one of my dad's favorite fish to eat. And I remember we go out there and we catch these fish, and we weren't out there very long. We come back, and the guys were like, "Hey, we're gonna take your fish to the restaurant. Go grab a table." So we go grab a table. I sit down. It was just my dad and I, and I think I was like maybe 11 years old, 10 or 11, and I'm sitting down. I got my feet in the sand, and my dad orders a beer and ostiones, oysters, on the shell, and he's like sucking them down and throwing them in the bucket, think, and I was eating them too, man. He ordered like, I don't know, like a dozen or 2 dozen or something like that. Then a little while later, this waiter comes up and he's like, "Hey, come on, how do you want your fish prepared, sir?" And he's like, "Oh," and he tells him and stuff, and okay. Dude, they brought these fish out. I mean, it was fresh, man. Literally, the fish was still moving when the chef got it in his hand. They processed it, whatever they did. They cooked it up. They put it in front of me. It was bigger than the plates. They didn't have a plate that was the plate was like couldn't even hold the fish. It was just coming off. And my dad, I mean, that's all we had. We just no sides, no rice and beans. We just ate the fish. And my dad ate his fish. And back then I was just, now I could probably eat the whole thing, but back then I just ate one half, and I was stuffed, and it was huge, man. It was enormous. And my dad's like, "Don't worry about it, I'll eat it." So he finished it off for me, but it was a lot of fish, and I think he must have only paid a few bucks for that.
Yeah.
I think the beers were probably more expensive than the fish.
And the fish itself, yeah.
It was incredible.
Wow.
I still remember that. I mean, it's one of the best fish I ever had. It was fantastic.
That's the thing with Mexico. It's kind of a heartbreaking country for me. And the reason I'm saying this, it's the natural resources in Mexico, the wildlife, the diversity of animals, and pretty much any kind of species out there. It's just tremendous. Some of the best in the world. Somebody was just telling me that I think Oaxaca has one of like the oldest tree, or the tree that is the thickest in the world.
I believe it.
And they're known for having very unique
ecosystems.
And,
Yeah.
and when it comes down to like food, they have like very unique culinary,
Yes.
and it's like world level stuff.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, it's like, man, you look at all the violence that is going on, just how what the country has turned out into since around 2008, 2009, I think it was that. Might have been 2006. No, it was later on. But yeah, I'm looking at just how bad it is, right? And I was just looking at the potential that the country has,
Mm.
but just how it's held back. How it's held back by everything that's going on down there.
Yeah, you know, when I would visit, my dad and my family would go to Mexico or Mexico, and I noticed something that it was appalling. There was mangoes on the ground rotting. There was mango trees everywhere, everywhere, and there was just mangoes on the ground just rotting. You come to the States, a mango's a buck or a buck 20, whatever. In Mexico, they're falling on the ground. People are kicking them into the curve. That's how rich of resources that country has, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. I mean, to be that rich and have mangoes on the ground, man, like lime trees, just limes everywhere. It was crazy. And I told my dad, I was like, why don't just people sell these like they do? But you know, we gotta have buyers. You gotta, you know, that's a different conversation. But it was just incredible to being a kid and just grab a mango from the tree, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible. And here you got to go to the store, you know, and pay whatever it is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting, man.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic country down there.
It is,
just
man.
The way
It is.
and,
Yeah.
and the people there, they're hardworking people.
Mm-hmm.
They're super hardworking.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree.
But on the flip side, some areas they have exploited their natural resources.
Oh, no doubt.
The wildlife and like
No doubt.
one of the where my mom is from, they have a lake or a pond, and my uncle was telling me that that lake used to have fish, but they don't anymore. And that's because they don't have a conservation program. They don't have any of these things down there. So people are just going out there, hey, let's party, and
Taking whatever they want.
take everything, yep. And so they just kept taking, and all of a sudden the lake ran out of fish. Same thing happens with a lot of other species like rabbits. You just like, he was telling me that sometimes people just see a rabbit and they're like, oh, I got a 22, and just shoot it, and like just for fun. And so he was telling me a lot of that was happening, and so a lot of wildlife, you don't see it anymore. I was just seeing that there's this oso plata oso. It's this bear. It's called silverback bear. No, that's a gorilla. But there's a bear that had like silver skin or fur, and it was driven into extinction back in the late 1800s because people just kept hunting them, and eventually they just ran out. And not to say that it didn't happen here in the U.S., right? Because we've had buffalo and we have many other species that were close to extinction. But thanks to the conservation programs, we're able to bring a lot of these control these populations and reintroduce some of these populations, such as moose, elk, bison, and yeah, it's just maybe that's something that Mexico needs. It's something like a conservation program.
Yeah, you know, what's really interesting that you say that, because the best bass fishing on the planet is in Mexico. Lago, I think I might mispronounce it, Barraca, I think. El Salto. There's some different lakes, and I had the pleasure, I'll give a shout out to my buddy Todd Hyung. What's up, man? He, Big T, he brought Gary Yamamoto which is Gary Yamamoto uh, is a bait manufacturer. He's a person who made the famous Senko bait. It's a basic. It's a worm, man. It's a plastic worm with salt in it, and it is one of the number one baits on the planet. Like, it is deadly. We make videos on it. Like, on our podcast, we talk about it. If you're an angler, especially if you're a bass angler, you're using that bait. You know what I'm saying? You're using that. There's no question. And I had the pleasure of talking to him, and like, we hung out, and it was so cool to like listen to him, and he gave me some tips on some stuff, and I was like, holy shit, man, Gary Yamamoto just gave me some fishing advice, man. I was like, wow, that's like Michael Jordan, critiquing your jump shot, man. That it was awesome. So, but where I was going with that, and I forgot where I was going with that. Where were we talking about? Please refresh my recollection. I brought him up. About lakes in Mexico. Well, he was a guide. Gary Yamamoto was a guide in Mexico. And the best, when you look at all the guys and gals, all the anglers, pro anglers, that go on vacation, you know where they go? They go to Mexico. You know why? Because Mexico's awesome, beautiful weather, and they have the best bass fishing on the planet. Oh. So that's why I was bringing up Gary Yamamoto, because he used to be a guide on there. And he told me, like, there was all kinds of people would go there from all over the world to go bass fish. From all over the world, man. So we have the resources. It's just, my mom is big into politics, but you have politicians who literally sold natural resources to other countries. You know what I mean? To benefit themselves, not the people or el pueblo, to benefit themselves. And that's the problem. That's why those conservation programs that you brought up are, man, I'll be all over that. It's great. But
yeah, you're right about that.
The execution and the corruption.
Yeah, it would not let it. Because the money wouldn't get to the
to the people on the ground that are like to buy soil, to get fuel for that big truck, to make a hole, to put water, to run pipelines, to fresh water filtration systems, biologists, geologists, arborists. None of those people would make any, like, they wouldn't even get paid, or no funding would be there because the politicians would have it in their Swedish bank accounts.
So it seems like you need the private industry, similar to Africa, and you need where the private industry is the one doing the conservation work that the government could be doing, but cannot be trusted. So instead, you incentivize people to go down there, spend money, and then that money, hopefully through organizations, goes into the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, but it's really interesting. I'm gonna go down there. One of my trips, one of my things that I want to do is with my father, as I want to go down there and spend 7 days down there with him fishing for bass. Because on a normal day, so here's a comparison. So a really good bass here in Minnesota is 5 pounds. That's like, wow, man, you got a 5-pounder. That's huge. That's an enormous fish. That's a fish that's close to 15 years old. It's a large fish. In Florida, that's normal because of the metabolism and the metabolite rate, how they grow. But you go down to Mexico, you're catching 10, 12, 14-pound fish, man. Bass, or what in Spanish, lobina. That's unheard of here. Unheard of. Those kind of fish, they exist, but not in a different species, like, northern pike, muskie, or what they call exos, which is a muskie pike, the pike family. Excuse me. But yeah, that's a dream trip of mine is to go down to Mexico, man, and go with the old man and just try to catch a 10-pounder, man. That's the dream.
Yep.
Hopefully we can do that one of these days.
Well, hopefully you can do that.
Oh my God, that'd be great.
So you've done hunting and fishing,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously I can tell that your number one thing and passion seems to be fishing.
Yeah, yeah, it is outdoors, but yeah, fishing. You know, it's funny because I started hunting first and fishing, but I got more. And you know why? Because fishing is a little bit more practical than hunting is. Because you can do it. You can do it. You can do it more, and more year round.
Yeah.
Especially here in Minnesota because of the weather and seasonalities.
Yep.
You can fish a lot longer. That's why it's way more popular. Hunting is very, very popular. Don't get me wrong, man. I love to hunt. I'll be out there. I mean, we did some bird hunting, dove hunting this year. That was fun. Hopefully, we'll do some pheasant hunting here coming up, and then we'll do some deer hunting. So we plan on doing that. But yeah, fishing is definitely a big, big passion of mine because of how practical it is to do.
Yeah, yeah, because you don't need as much to get started,
Correct.
and you can also you hit it right on the spot. You can do it pretty much year long. You just gotta understand what species you can fish.
Correct.
During the season.
Correct.
And other than that, yeah, you're good to go.
And the other thing too is a lot of people are, you know, we live in a country with a lot of things that are going on. People are terrified of firearms. So when you tell a mom, hey, we're going to take your son or daughter hunting, they're like, with guns? You're like, yeah. They're like, But if you say, we're going to go fishing, they're like, oh, that's fine. Just make sure they don't hook themselves. There's a big difference there, man. And like how that conversation goes, you know, because my mom, I'm telling you from experience, because my mom was like, she's still like that, you know? So, and I can't even imagine, I know a lot of parents are, and you should be concerned, you know, but with proper safety and you go with experienced people, accidents just don't happen, you know?
And that's where I would like to see the Hispanic Latino community get more involved with. For me, it would be more involved with hunting. It's the whole thing of trying to change the culture within the Hispanic community and getting them to understand that, hey, we have the Second Amendment for self-defense, but it also gives us the liberty to go out and hunt. Now, it doesn't say on the Second Amendment anywhere that the Second Amendment is for hunting.
Correct.
But at the same token, we have the liberty to utilize it and go out hunting. It's a great thing that not a lot of countries have. You don't have that in Mexico. So that's one of my things. It's getting people to understand, hey, you have this right. Use it. And not only that, it's everything that comes with hunting and fishing. So I guess you started Baztec.
Baztec back in 2017.
2017.
Dude, I started at Cinco de Mayo in 2017.
Were you drunk?
No, I wasn't. I promise I wasn't drinking tequila. It just happened to fall on that day. Actually, it was really funny. I looked after I registered with the Secretary of State. I'm like, oh, Cinco de Mayo. Look at that. Yeah, so it's pretty fun. It's a fun date.
Nice.
So when we're going to be bringing out probably in the spring, we're going to be and I'd be honored if I could share or bring some swag, some shirts or hoodies and stuff to share with you and stuff. And support our efforts in the community, but we're gonna actually be, you know, having those for sale through our e-commerce, our website and stuff. So, t-shirts, hats, decals, different things like that. So that'll be pretty cool, man. We're looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, you started Baztec, right? And so you're trying to get the community more involved into fishing, and I don't know, does that involve hunting as well?
Yeah, we're going to. That's a great question. So when I started Baztec, I saw a need in the community. You know, big need in the community for an ambassador, a liaison, and you know, I thought about not only my family but other people's families, and I said, you know, how can I help? How can I provide support? how can I work with my community? And I'm like, well, let me start off by just making some videos and so on and so forth. So that's how we started, very organically, very grassroots, and it's grown, and it's keep growing. And now we have a pro staff, and it's fantastic, man. I'm very blessed. I have some great people that work for us, man. And I'm so blessed. But we always had the vision of not just the fishing side. Again, it's very practical, but also the hunting side. We're going to start incorporating that in the near future. When exactly, we don't know yet, but that's definitely in the works. That's definitely in the works. And I have some folks that I'm going to be working with, and if I can hire them, it probably happens sooner than later, because they're great people. They're very smart, and they're very passionate about the outdoors. And so that was my vision, to create not just fishing, but I'll give you an example. And if he listens to this, he's gonna be like, "What? I got a buddy who's a big biker. He does fat tire biking. His name is Matt Flugel. We call him the Flugernator. We call him all kind of Flugel. What's up, dude? Love you, man. Matt Flugel. I would love to hire a guy like that for our company. Have him, because he's a very outdoor. This guy is a savage. You know what he does, man? He bikes like I don't know how many miles. He's a maniac. I mean that in a very loving way. It's January and February, and this dude's biking. Then he sets up camp on some frozen state park. Gets up and keeps biking. Sleeps 8 hours and he goes. Those are the kind of diversification that our organization is going to be doing. And he's going to say, watch it. He's like, you know what? You want to hire me to do that? And I'm like, yes. In the future, you're going to work. Please come work for me. Come work for our organization, because he's very passionate about biking. But if we can incorporate the biking and we can add more, maybe a little bit of this and a little bit of that, bikes, we had, I think it was LEDC or Latino organization, maybe not them, I forgot who it was, BCs and becas, so with bicycles and scholarships. Excuse me. I think they did it a few weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago. A great program. And you sign up, you do a bike, and you do the biking deal, you do like I don't know, from A to B, and then that money, the registration money, goes to scholarships for students, for they want to go into college. So fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. So again, I'm thinking long term in the future. We're going to have a portfolio of activities, not just fishing, but hunting. I got something else in the works with bird watching. And I can't reveal the person's name because he'll probably get in trouble, but he knows who he is. And he's a good friend of mine, and he's already really helped with our as a what they call a consigliere, like they say in Italian, a counselor, an advisor, like in Godfather, consigliere, and he's just fantastic. He has a PhD, brilliant guy, and I said, dude, when the moment is right, you have to join our organization. He's like, absolutely, man. So again, putting the pieces together, man, putting those pieces together. And it's going to take time to build that, but we already have a really good foundation.
So do people reach out to Baztec more, or does Baztec reach out more to the people that, and not, I mean, like the people who want to learn and get involved with these activities?
Yeah, it's a great question. Both. So part of our responsibility, and I say responsibility, I think if you are a person that has a particular set of skills, whatever it is, if it's building tables, making furniture, audio, fishing, hunting, you should teach that. You should teach that to somebody and share it with the world, because these are gifts that we have, that God gave us, and we can't take it with us. When we're gone, that's it. Mm-hmm. So why not give it away, right? So that's my philosophy. So what we want to do is we want to keep making content, digital content. That's why, that's why even like you have a lot of subscribers. That's great. You know, a lot of people are going to reach out to you, or this podcast is going to reach out to a lot of folks. So it's a two-way street. So with our organization, it's the same way. It's a two-way street. We would definitely want to reach out more to folks, but we really hope they reach out to us as well. Yeah. And we want feedback. Like there's a lady, her name's Tammy. Hey Tammy, shout out. She's great. She loves to fish, loves fishing, and she's a big fan of ours, but we're a big fan of hers first. You know why? My staff, because she is so sweet and so like passionate about the sport, and she wants to learn. And we asked her, hey, what do you want to learn more? Can you give us some feedback? What can we do better? Because we don't know everything. We don't, and we don't claim to know everything. What we want to do is serve the community, serve others by asking them, hey, what's important to you? What do you want to learn? How do you want to learn that? Do you want to listen to it on a podcast? Do you like a video, a how-to series? And that's how that started. Because of her and some of the other folks in the BIPOC community, they gave me the idea to do the how-to series. So now we do a how to do this, how to do that. And that's how it's fun. It's literally that organic. And it's because of those folks. That's why we were able to have those ideas, if you will, or they inspired us to create those ideas.
Mm-hmm. So, like when I went on your website, I was trying to contact you, contact somebody, and it was very difficult to do so.
And I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, and we have to, you know, I'm always looking to do better.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed, and then I kept digging and digging. Eventually I found your Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
And once I got on Facebook, I was like, I'm not on Facebook. I don't use Facebook
sure,
that much.
Sure. And, yeah, I get it. How do I get a hold of this guy?
Yeah, I was like, well, how do I do this? I was like, well, you got to download the Messenger app. I was like, okay. And
you're like, another obstacle.
And so, yeah, I'm not like, I get it. A lot of people use Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, and lots of stuff. I don't. I'm mainly phone, like text messages and email. But yeah, I noticed that, and I thought, okay, this makes it a little bit difficult to get a hold of anybody in Baztec.
Sure.
And the other thing was the updates didn't seem as new.
Okay.
Like as fresh. And recently you have added more content to your channel.
We have.
And it seems like you had a little bit of a slowdown, and now you're picking up again.
Yes, we did. And we went through a little transition, you know, with some staff, and you know, that's part of running an organization. You're going to have those bumps in the road, and you know, we like to say slow motion is better than no motion, right? You know, yeah. But no, I really, really appreciate the feedback, because when you know better, you can do better.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know? And that's one thing that I love reading books. I'm a book nerd.
Sure, absolutely.
I've seen that a lot, where feedback is always the best thing. And I always ask people, I even have a video on a couple of videos on YouTube, I think, where I'm shooting firearm, and on the title it was like, hey, any feedback would be appreciated. And then somebody was like, hey, do this, that. And I was like, oh, cool. And usually, like, the majority of people will not give you feedback. It's very hard to get that. But once you get it, and there's also the risk of differentiating feedback versus what somebody just thinks. Right? And, like, because at the end of the day, it's your horse. And
sure. No, absolutely, right? Like, you know, I mean, you could go over so many different examples, you know, on how to hold a firearm, how to do you shrug, not shrug, your base, your stance. I mean, you can break all that really technical nuances down, but at the end of the day, whatever it is that you're doing, as long as you're hitting the target, right? You know.
Well, for me, a lot of that changed the way I train firearms.
Sure.
It changed a lot last year. I had an injury where I cut a nerve.
Oh, on your hand, on your left hand.
Yep.
Oh
And
man,
so
sorry, man.
that's I was like, well, shoot, like, won't be able to shoot a firearm anymore with both hands, or
Sure.
who knows? And then eventually, like, I had a little bit of strength, and then it kept regaining strength slowly. But at the time, I needed to get better at shooting, and I've always wanted it since I got into firearms. I wanted to get better at shooting,
Sure.
and so I always used to listen to instructors all the time. Hey, whatever instructor tell me, I would try it. And then I would try a lot of things on my own, and I would ask everybody around me, even like the people who a lot of people thought were incompetent. I would ask them like, "Hey, man, like, what do you do here?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, like I do this." And it's like, oh, "Yeah, that sounds pretty fucking stupid, but I'll try it."
Right. You're
And-
like,
and I would
you're like,
go
oh,
in-
you're like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
terrible. That's a terrible technique.
And then I would try it, and I was like, "Yeah, well, this didn't work, or well, maybe this improved something."
Yeah.
And then eventually, after my injury, that's when things really exploded for me because I changed my mindset of just hitting the target and taking my time, and this whole mentality of slow is smooth, smooth is fast, to fast is fast. You cannot change it. You have to go fast.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Yeah.
so that mentality I got from Baztec, who's in Wisconsin, super great guy. He's a world elite,
Marksman.
yeah,
Shoot,
USPSA competitor.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
Him, and
Wow.
I started listening to his podcast.
Sure.
Started watching his videos about his books, and eventually I started subscribing to this whole idea of like,
Sure.
I gotta speed up my shooting. So then I
Interesting.
that's when things got really interesting and really fun for me. Was when I was able to really push myself to what I call it, and he calls it reactive shooting, where it's like you're not even thinking,
Right.
you're letting your mind and your mechanics just do the work, and a lot of your work comes on how you're holding the firearm, and your vision, and you have to really train your vision. So yeah, that's my shooting change with that. But yeah, going back to getting people into these things, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, reaching out to people. I think maybe going out to like Latino businesses and dropping like cards.
Yeah, yeah, no, those are all great ideas. We do work. I partner with Casa de Esperanza, or now Esperanza United, Clues, which is a nonprofit organization.
I think I've heard that.
They're an enormous organization. We also the Spanish podcast helps. We have specific fishing programs that we only do in Spanish. For Latino communities, and we also partner with Huellas Latinas that partner with Mississippi Watershed. Mississippi Watershed funds those programs, hires us to facilitate those programs, and we then will invite Latino groups to these events. So we just had one in September, late September, on the river. It was a lot of fun. We had a good turnout, so that was a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing more seminars and workshops, a lot more of those, and that's why I'm hiring more staff too. Because I can only do so. It's only one me, right? So I have some great staff that are going to be out, soldiers out, putting out the word. And I think it's important to like market and promote as much as possible through different channels: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, podcasts. I mean, all of it. So yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It's important.
Yeah, reaching out to the Latino community. You just mentioned that you have the Spanish and you have the English. There's a huge difference on with the language more than anything.
Absolutely.
Because it's really easy. Not really easy, but it's a lot easier to reach to people here who speak English. It's just easier to get them into absorbing content, going to events, and just kind of grasping everything. As opposed to a person in Spanish, I would think it's more the language barrier. Once you get out to trying to learn something, or you are, let's say, I don't speak English, and I go out on public land, and all of a sudden I run into other hunters.
Mm-hmm.
That would there would be no way to converse if something's going on, or whatever.
If you're not wearing your orange, they're trying to tell you something. And yeah, no, there's, when I was at the DNR, when I joined that organization some time ago, I'm no longer with them. However, one of the first things that I noticed was there was lack of awareness. And what I mean by lack of awareness is, and I'll say this, and it's not to beat up the DNR. They know what I'm saying is true. They did not know how to communicate and go into market, how to speak to these communities. And it's not, we can point the finger, but that's not what I'm doing, or that's not at all what I'm conveying. What I'm trying to say is that when I got there, they didn't know what to do. They had an idea. There's a lot of smart people that work there. A lot of brilliant, great people work there, but they just didn't know how to do it. You know what I mean? And I think they did a great job by hiring liaisons from certain communities, me being one of them. However, you gotta hire the right people, the right positions that have the right or the correct experience to build something, to build capacity, to build awareness. And to your point, like in the Latino hunting and fishing and all this, we've been doing that for a long time. We come from very old indigenous roots, indigenous people in Mexico. And so our hunter-gatherer DNA it's deep. Mm-hmm. People come into the country, they don't have awareness. What can I do? How do I do it? How many can I keep? Where can I hunt? Where can I fish? Do I need a license? How much does it cost? There's a lot of questions. So the first thing I did, Omar, is I literally created a PowerPoint addressing all that. I started with this. Who is the DNR? What does the DNR do? Because people, even Americans, even English-speaking Americans, they think that that agency, all they do is check licenses. Or, let me see your fishing license. Let me see your hunting license. No, they do way more than that. They're great. They work with, they have so many divisions that do so many different things. Mm-hmm. But everyone thinks that's all they do is, watch for poaching and check your fishing license,
That camp.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you know whose fault that is? That's the DNR's fault for not marketing themselves. Other than that, like it's like like Jennifer Aniston. She's beautiful and she's a great actress, but she plays always the same role, the ex-girlfriend, right? She plays somebody's girlfriend, and that's it. The DNR put themselves in a box where like they have a role, like, well, we just check for poaching and we check licenses, because that's a perpetual narrative that people in the community, that's what the DNR does. No, they do way more than that. When I used to tell people that I was a liaison, that I taught fishing and hunting, they were like, you do what? The DNR does it? And I was like, well, they did. And again, I can only do so much, mm-hmm. On the marketing side, and that was not even my role. That wasn't my job, even though I do have a background in that. However, so the first thing, all that being said, the first thing I did was build a PowerPoint addressing fundamental questions. What is this? What is that? What do we do? How do we do it? Literally like holding somebody's hand. And when I was at these seminars, people would be like, wow, man, I didn't know you. Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know this and I didn't know that. I'll share it with you sometime so you can see it. It's just very basic information that people should know, and that's one of the things I was really proud of that I did there, because it took me a long time to build it, because I put my immigrant hat on. And I was like, let me see. I got to get blue collar and immigrant here because I got to think like the community thinks. I got to ask questions that the community is going to ask. I already know this stuff. These folks don't know it. Mm-hmm. And even so, the regulation book, there's a lot of legal stuff in there. People at the DNR don't even understand it. I'm be honest. It's not to beat the DNR up, not at all. You'll get a question and they'll grab the book and start, okay, so, all right, but, and they start amongst professionals there, they start talking about it and there's a dialogue, and then they like, well, what about this? Well, yeah, but she says this. And then there's this like misunderstanding or what does that really mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've experienced that firsthand, calling the DNR, asking, hey, I saw this in the book. Here's what it says. Here's what it says on this other part.
Yes.
And then here's what it says over here. And then I'm like, so what exactly is it that I cannot do?
Correct. Because it doesn't tell you.
No, and I'm like, if I do this, and there are a lot of people were like, well, what's your specific question? I'm like, well, or what do you want to do? I'm like, if I park in this space,
mm-hmm.
specific space, and the statute says this, and this other part says this, am I going to get a ticket or worse if I park there overnight? And this was like during winter time.
Sure.
And they're like, well, we'll give you a phone number to like the local DNR guy.
Sure.
Well, whatever.
Yeah,
so then I call him and I'm like, hey, I got your phone number from the DNR, blah, blah, blah. What can I do? Can I do what I want to do? And it's like, well, I don't know. So I'll give you this other phone number. I kid you not, I went through like this process multiple times until they got me to, I don't even know what this lady's title was. But I'm like, I think her name was it was Laura or was it Elizabeth, one of those two names. But anyway, she was out in Duluth area, and I talked to her, and finally I'm like, hey, I have this question. I'm gonna simplify it, and blah blah blah. And then eventually she was like, okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and the answer is no. But no one's gonna check on you. So I was like, I got a very vague question with a no in it. And I was like, okay, at the end of the day, it's a no. I got the no.
Right.
I'm not gonna risk it.
Sure.
But yeah, what you're saying about...
Yeah.
And I don't know who writes those... laws and whatnot.
Yeah, regulation book. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that it's very confusing.
It can be.
And for some people, to this day, I have to go back and revise it and like, okay, so what does it say here? And then just kind of formulate what I can do and cannot do fishing or hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to dive into dissecting books when I read them, especially when it's something like that. It's like I go paragraph by paragraph, and then if I see something that contradicts it, then I'm like, okay, wait,
that doesn't make sense.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so part of it is that I try to get away with things, which, yeah,
there's that gray area, man.
Yeah, there's that. I'm trying to find that area where I can be like, okay, I can get away with this.
Right.
Push it to the line. But on the same token, it's like, yeah, I go through this and I consider myself a person who finds this stuff. It should be finding this stuff easy to understand, and instead I end up super confused sometimes.
And it's not only you; it's very intelligent people at the agency too. Because they're like, okay, so, and they start going through hypotheticals, or they start breaking down the language and the geography, and it is confusing. Yeah. So
yeah, for the Latino community who...
You imagine?
To begin with, yeah, they don't really grow up with hunting. I think a lot of it comes from, people who are illegal. They cannot have firearms.
Correct.
A lot of people have come here illegally. And so when they have children, they can. It's like this whole thing. You just don't grow up around it, and especially if you grow up in certain areas of the country, it's like you even have much less of an access to it, and so yeah, it's just something that people don't really know. I've met people recently who they want to get into hunting, but they're very hesitant on taking that step. And it's like, well, I don't, yeah, like I'm interested, but I'm very hesitant about it. And they haven't even seen the book, like the regulations book. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, I can help you out to a certain extent, but I'm not, like, I don't understand public land too well. Those laws really confuse me. Some of those things that you can and cannot do. And it's just, I can try my best. And one of them, I told them, I was like, hey, I'm going to have this podcast with this guy who's got Baztec, and like, I'll ask
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
for you. And so he was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. And one of the things I told him was like, yeah, like, main thing is we get you a firearm that's legal in the area that you're going to be hunting.
Correct the caliber, right? The correct caliber.
Caliber, and if it's a shotgun or rifle.
Shotgun season, muzzleloader. Yeah, correct. Yep.
So I was explaining these things, like, yeah, and then the question always pops up. It's like, well, can I just buy a firearm? I was like, yeah, you just need if it's a rifle, I believe in Minnesota, you just go there and do the fill out the form.
Correct.
And they check your background, and if you're clean, okay, cool, you're good to go. Pistols, yeah, do you have to have a permit to purchase, I believe?
You do. And you need to get that through your local
police department.
Police department, yep. They will have a background check and stuff like that. So yeah, and then you can buy it.
And then you can buy it, and that
doesn't mean you can carry it. It just means you can buy it.
Yeah, it does not mean you can carry
right.
firearms. You can buy
Let's be very clear here. Yeah.
And I think that only applies to handguns, if I'm correct.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And you got to be careful too, because some rifles are considered pistols.
Yep. And that's
so that's a different deal, man. So like you go into a place, and then you know what I mean. You got to know what you're buying, what you're purchasing.
And Latinos that are taken out shooting, just shooting out to the range. I take out my 300 blackout and take out my 5.56. I'm like, yeah, have fun at it. Like, just have at it. And they're like, they're having fun shooting all this, shooting the handgun, shooting the AR pistol and the AR, the rifle, and the shotgun and everything. And then when they start asking questions about buying and possession and all of these things,
the legal stuff,
and I mentioned, hey, this is a pistol. This is a rifle. They look the same, right? And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like,
yeah, it confuses the hell out of them.
Yeah, you get that confused look on their face, and I'm like, okay. They're like, why? I'm like, well, this has to do with legislation. It has to do with laws. It's just the way it is. This is right now. This thing might become illegal, or it might become a felony at some point.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, depending on how the laws change.
Right.
But just understand that if you're going to buy something, ask me first before you go out and buy it. If you want to get a rifle, we can go out there. You get your rifle, and like, you should be good to go. I know a guy, one of my cousins, he's 18 or 19. He was wondering if he could buy a firearm. I was like, yeah, you can buy a rifle, but he was like, oh, I want to buy a pistol. And it's like, well, you can't. He was like, well, can I go through like a private sale to buy it? And I was like, I don't know. Like, you're asking questions where like if I were to give you advice, I'd say no. Like, just go the easy dealer channel.
Right. Buy some legitimate.
Yeah, and just go that route for now. And once you understand this stuff and you want to dive in on your own on this stuff, going on private sales when you're, trying to buy a pistol and you're not 21 yet, and whatever happens there, that's your deal. But if you're going with me, we're gonna do it like the safest way.
Safest and legal way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, with the Latino community, they
Mm-hmm.
just the firearms alone is like they have a hard time grasping a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that,
Correct.
you throw that. Well, I guess once you get the license, is kind of easy, but not really because you get to the store and they're like, "What zone are you gonna be shooting, or what series do you want? You want Series A or Series B?" And you're just like, even to myself, the first time I bought one, I'm like, "I have no clue. I guess I'll go A." And they're like, "Okay," and they're like, "What zone?" And luckily, the person who told me how to buy, he's like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna ask you for what zone, and just say this zone number." I was like, "Okay, cool." So then I was like, I gave him the zone number. So for those of you who do not know, it's the state of Minnesota is divided into multiple zones, and each zone has its own limits on what you can shoot. Well, this is for deer hunting, and what yeah, how many deer can you shoot, what gender, and that's about it for zones, I think.
Yeah, because like in Red Wing, some years ago, this is a long time ago, they had like I don't know if it's called an intensive license or where you can do one antler and like four antlerless,
Mm-hmm.
which are basically four does,
Yep.
you know. And I remember a long time ago, I was dating this gal, and her uncle lived down there, and we go fishing and hunt all the time. And I remember he harvested that day, I think one day, like a bunch of deer. And I was like, hey man, and I was like, hey, can we do that? And he's like, oh yeah. And he showed me his license, and he had all the tags. And I was like, oh well. Come to find out, they were just overpopulated
Mm-hmm.
like back then, and the DNR said, "Hey, we for this season, we'll go ahead and do that." So but those are exceptions, and
Yep.
that does change year by year.
Yep. And so you have some zones, predominantly up north, where you're limited to less deer because
Correct.
the deer up in those zones they're dying off. It gets very cold. You got wolves. You got I think it's moose who are eating the resources of the other deer would have. But here down here in the metro, certain areas they'll let you hunt more. A lot of it has to do as well with chronic waste disease.
Yeah, CWD,
Yes.
that's a big problem. Yeah.
Chronic waste disease is a prion that affects deer. So basically, it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it's a protein that goes rogue in the body and it's like spread out. It used to be thought that this was only found in the spine and the brain, but these eventually they found out that it's found all throughout the animal. Uh, I believe it's found in the meat as well, but it's also in all the bodily fluids, and so this spreads around. And it's basically, if you ever heard of
Mad cow disease.
mad cow disease,
Yep.
it's exactly the same thing. Now there are people who believe that it is safe to consume for humans, and there's the other camp who says, I'm not gonna take my chances. But at the end of the day, it is killing the deer population. It makes them go crazy, and you just see these like zombie deer running around in circles, and some of them are like I've seen videos
Running up deer stands, bothering hunters, smoking cigarettes. Yeah, you're right, man. They go nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And so hunting is very beneficial to controlling these populations because otherwise my understanding is that DNR wouldn't even be able to do it on their own. So they rely on hunters to spread the disease, and so they look at the spread of deer, like how they're moving around the state. And I've seen some of these charts, and they're very interesting. But then they use that information to say, okay, we're gonna select this zone, and we're gonna hand out as many tags as possible or whatever, and each tag is gonna be only like $2.50. So that's one thing if you're looking into getting into hunting is be mindful of chronic waste disease, study it, research it, and the zones,
Hmm.
and trying to think what else. That's one of the biggest things. That and rules and regulations, which yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, information, awareness, education is the key for these communities. And a long time ago, man, they had a problem, long time ago, 20 plus years ago. We have a wonderful community in the Southeast Asian community. And within that community, you have Hmong people, which is just a great culture and great people. There was that incident. I don't know if you know, had heard about it years ago. This, I think it happened in Wisconsin. I was just talking to one of my fraternity brothers about this, and there was a gentleman who was out hunting, and I believe, and again, I don't remember, I vaguely remember, but he was out hunting, and he, obviously he's a brown man, he's a Hmong man. He was out there, I believe he was on a tree stand, and then he was engaged by other hunters, Caucasian hunters, white hunters, and I think they ended up shooting him, and he defended himself. And there was a lot of reports, man, like about what happened and whatnot. But there was a racist incident, if you will, and it was just terrible, man. And again, I think this happened back it was in the mid to late '90s, man. When this happened, I want to say more like the late '90s, and it really shook up things because that shouldn't have happened. That definitely shouldn't have happened. And someone shooting at you shouldn't have happened. And the poor guy defended himself. I think he ended up shooting somebody or killing somebody, but it was a self-defense. And again, I might be, some of this that I'm saying might be inaccurate, so I apologize to the audience, but I do remember vaguely some of this. But what the agency did, the DNR do after that, is they did something that a lot of law enforcement agencies would do, and they should have done a long time ago, is hire people from their own community, hire Hmong, Southeast Asian game wardens or conservation officers, and that's what started happening. So you see a lot more people of color in conservation as a conservation officer and women. So that was a good thing. So that really turned things around. Because if not, I can't say that there'd be more incidences like that, but the fact that there's that cultural barrier, that's what you want to avoid.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
and I have not experienced that,
Neither have I.
but I can see it too. And I want to say things have changed also, because the back in the '90s, even back in the 2000s, when we moved to Minnesota, it was not a very diverse place. Like up here, it was not very diverse, and then eventually it became more diverse, and now everybody's getting more involved into these things, thanks to programs like the DNR and what you're doing.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's I want to say the hopeful side of me says, yeah, things are changing, and because I had never heard of that incident, which I do believe in.
Unfortunately, it did happen. Yeah.
But the people that I know who are Hmong and Hispanics who are into hunting, like they've also have not experienced these things, and now you see a lot of Hmong people, like they go to these areas everywhere, and they're huge into hunting.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll give you a crazy statistic here. So there's a not too far from here actually where you live, Joe Sporting Goods.
Yep.
Yeah. So most of their staff, or a lot of their staff, is Southeast Asian, and big shout out to Joe Sporting Goods for supporting Baztec and supporting us, and they're so wonderful. Lori, Mr. The family, Doug Staley, the general manager. All those folks are great, and their staff is just fantastic. Everyone there. Doug Staley, the general manager, he says to me, over, what do you say, 70% or right around there of their sales, fishing sales, come from the Southeast Asian community.
70%.
Maybe
Wow.
more. And I was like, it doesn't surprise me. You go in there anytime there's people from the community there, people from the Southeast Asian community, walking out with new rods and reels or equipment. And if they're not holding a fishing rod, they're holding hunting ammo or hunting gear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's fantastic. And it's so cool that the leadership there, the ownership is like, we need to be part of this community. We need to hire people from the community to support their own people from the community.
People who speak the language.
That's right, man. They're not reinventing the wheel. They're like, we need folks from that community here. We want to help. We want to support. We're part of the community. And they've done a tremendous job. They just got an award, man. Joe's Sporting Goods is in the Minnesota Fishing Hall of Fame. Yeah, dude,
Wow.
that's really cool. I went in there, I was like, wow, you guys are in the Hall of Fame. That's so cool, man. So I was really proud of them, and that's really, really, really great news. And they're just great people, just great. So I that's where I shop. I do all my shopping there, simply because they're great. Always have inventory. And I was had to go there. Unfortunately, had to go there to take a rod that I broke. And I was like, that's what you hate to do. You're like, man. And I walked in with that rod, and because the guys know me there, the pro staff knows me there, and they're like, oh my god, it broke. How'd you break it, man? It was so like interesting to watch those like grown men like be sad. It was really funny. It's funny, but like not at the same time. They're like, oh man, I can't believe you broke this. I don't know how I did it, and they took care of it. It's a Daiwa rod that I unfortunately ended up breaking, which is one of like my favorite rods.
Wow.
So yeah, but that's fishing. That happens.
But yeah, I've seen like I go to different stores.
Oh sure, of course.
Fleet Farm is one where I've seen the demographics also change a lot.
Oh no doubt.
Years ago, I used to go in there and you see a certain demographic, and now when I go there, it's like a lot of like Southeast Asian people, and it's guys who do not speak any English. Like they'll go in with their son, and like, oh yeah, and the son is like,
the little kid is translating, right?
yeah, and he's like translating. He's like, oh okay, and like, it's great to see that though, that they are utilizing their right, and they're like, hey, like I'm gonna buy these shotgun just because I can. And I'm gonna go hunting with it just because I can. And to me, it's just awesome that they're, seeing that change in the community. And that's where I'm like thinking, yeah, it'd be nice to see the Latino community as well.
Right, and I'm gonna tell you, man, and this might, and it's okay if it does. This might upset some retailers. Definitely not Joe's because they're doing it right. But there are a lot of companies out there. I'm not going to name any. But you know who you are. That there's a lot of people in suit and ties that are smart and they deserve their post. But I'll tell them this: you're missing out on a huge demographic of people that want to buy your product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is
huge. They're missing, and I don't know if they're okay with it or if they're not okay with it, but just specifically, the Latino marketplace is enormous, enormous, and they have disposable income to purchase products. You look at Chevy, look at Ford. Who drives those trucks? Mm-hmm. We do. Okay, who drinks light beer? Latinos do. I mean, I can keep going on some of these products. The beer companies figured it out.
Mm-hmm. And Chevy did
and
too.
Chevy and Ford, they figured it out. They're like, hey, man, Toyota's figuring it out. They have Spanish commercials. I did a thing with Nissan. I did a commercial with Nissan. I'll send it to you if you want. This is a while ago, like maybe last year. Yeah, literally a year from now. And again, if you have a product that you want to sell it, this is the market. This is one of the many markets.
There is a book that always recommend people to anybody who wants to go into business to read. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of that book.
So Blue Ocean Strategy is basically, to summarize it, it's everybody's competing for the same thing. You know, something, the market is open. Everybody's going for the same thing, trying to copy each other. But then the person who just like swing, it's a bunch of sharks eating the same fish and biting into each other. It's just like
cannibalizing each other.
And they call it the Red Ocean because it's bloody and it's
Murky.
a mess and like it's very tough competition. And then all of a sudden there's a shark that's just like, I don't know any part of this. Hey, there's some blue water over there and some healthy fish. I'm gonna go over there. And so he swims away, finds this new spot, and that's why it's called Blue Ocean Strategy, because he's like, screw you guys, like you guys can kill each other. I'm just gonna go and, you know, have my own little heaven now. But then eventually the others figure it out and they're like, oh, look at that spot. And so you have to keep inventing. And the Latino community, that's where I see that Blue Ocean being just this massive thing. And when I heard about you, and then I started looking at Baztec, like the website, and then your Facebook page, I was like, man, I had never thought of this. Like, there is a massive
Opportunity.
Like this would be a massive explosion.
Yeah, and you know what's really, thank you for recognizing that. And not that I want you to be right. It's just, you can't be wrong. Mm-mm. You know, like you can't in a situation like this. Like, I'll give you an example. When I moved here in 1998, and I was in college, I grew up around, my mom made Mexican food. I grew up with Mexican food. I walked out down the street. You could get any Mexican dish you wanted in any restaurant. Deep dish pizza was one of my favorites, so. But you would go into a store like Cub Foods. There was no Latino products. But now, my friend, you go, they run out of product. They run out of tortillas. They run out of cheese. They run out of chorizo. They run out of crema. They didn't have it. The only thing they had was maybe flour tortillas and maybe canned beans. But, whatever. Now, you can get different kinds. You can get Oaxaca cheese, cotija. You can get shredded Chihuahua cheese. You get like 8 different types of Mexican cheese. Well, you know what they figured out? They're like, man, this is selling,
and this is what people want,
and this is what they want. And I get really frustrated because we as an organization have the delivery system to help these big companies, and I'm talking big companies, and again, I'm not going to name any because I don't want to put them on the spot. They're like, oh man, why are you picking on us, bro? And I'm like, well, don't allow me to pick on you. Do something about it. Let me help you sell more product. You know what I mean? Case in point, we're doing a adult BIPOC seminar with my staff, and two of the women there. One was African American, the other one was Native American. We have these really nice rod and reel setups. We have really good equipment with our organization. That was something that I really wanted to concentrate on because I've been to a lot of cookie cutter kind of seminars that do community outreach, fishing outreach, and fishing events, and they give you like a Snoopy rod. And I was like, I'm not going to hand that to an adult. This is a profession. We're professionals. Let's act like professionals. Let's get people good equipment in their hands, So at the conclusion of that event, they wanted to buy my rods, and I use them for educational purposes. I can't sell it to them because I'll run out of product, right? And this always keeps happening, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I thought to myself, man, I got to partner with somebody. So I partnered with Joe. So they've been very supportive. But I've reached out to, and I've got meetings, and I have more opportunities, thank God, because of this, to be able to have product placement in our events so we can sell the big brand products, because those big brands are really good, man. They're very, very, very good. And that's what I personally use. That's what I have on the deck of my boat. That's what my staff uses. We're still going to use that stuff, even if you don't sponsor us. It doesn't matter. That's how good it is.
Yep.
But here's the problem. That's a missed opportunity for them. That's a big missed opportunity that they're not getting into.
But yeah, that's talking about those large corporations who are missing out on this massive market.
Yes.
And I get where you're coming from, the frustration side of it. But on the flip side, I'm thinking that's a great thing to support smaller businesses. Because if the smaller business like Joe Sporting Goods, who is working with you and sponsoring you, if they're more a family-oriented business, and they're like, yeah, like they have values, right? They have a vision and values that they adhere to. It's a super massive win for them and for you and
For
the,
everyone, yeah.
Latino community and the people of color
Sure.
community. Is that what you call it? BIPOC?
Yeah,
People-
BIPOC, Black Indigenous people of color.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that entire market that is ready to freaking explode.
Yes.
It's like I'd rather see the company that listens and
Yes.
win than the large corporation that's it's just there for numbers.
They're too big to pay attention to you, right? Yeah.
And
yeah.
it has all these layers, whereas opposed to the smaller company has way less layers, and they're like, and
Right.
and they're working with the community, with
Right.
local community.
Well, I will give a big shout out to these guys, Rapala. Big shout out to them. They've been supportive, and I like that, and we got a good relationship, and I've been using their products since I was a kid, and I'm going to continue to use them even if they're not supporting us, like sponsoring us or helping us and stuff like that. It wouldn't really matter to me. I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, I do. I'm very, very grateful. However, I'd still buy the product because it's a phenomenal product, And the best part about it is all the Latino community sees my videos and sees this and sees that, and they're like, "Hey man, what color were you using and what rod were you using?" And that's the kind of stuff that I love, because you don't have to be a pro. You don't even have to have a fancy boat. You can do it from shore. We always talk about that. Like I didn't have a boat for a long time, man. And I fish from the shore all the time. I still do.
Yeah, the whole misconception of that you need a boat to get involved into fishing, and that was my thing. Like fishing, I don't do a lot, and that's one of the main reasons why. It's because I don't have a boat.
Sure.
One of my close friends, he does, and when I do go fishing in the summer or when it's warm, I'll usually go with him. But outside of that, for me to go out on my own, like I've gone out fishing on the shore, and it's like, it's not really the same. Well, the places that I've gone to,
Sure.
but yeah, for me, that's a barrier, and I'm sure there's a lot of people with the same mindset as myself.
Yes.
That, hey, we don't need a boat, or I don't have a boat, so I can't.
Right.
But you're saying the opposite.
I am, and you'll see it in 2023. We're gonna be very intentional of making videos from shore. We're gonna develop. There's a thing called the 1-2 punch. Basically, it's when you fish with two people. One person has a topwater bait. The other person has a bait that sinks in the water, or a jig, something it penetrates into the water. So here's what happens. So I'm in the lead. I'm here. You're where you're at, and I throw a topwater bait, and I get an explosion, a blow up, right from moving the bait on top of the water. All of a sudden, the fish reveals him or herself. I missed the fish. I'm like, God. All of a sudden, that's the first punch. The second punch is your bait right where that fish blew up. 1-2 punch. So we work as a team from shore if I hook up, from the top water position, from the first position, great. If I miss, you go, but you're still fishing. You can still catch a fish without seeing the explosion without having the fish reveal itself. Does that make sense? It works hand in hand, and we'll break down more in the video, and that's coming later on. That's coming like in the spring. That's more in the spring, and you can do it. I want to say all year long, but if you have a partner and you want to go fishing with somebody, that's a really good technique, and we're going to be really going through that technique with my staff. I'm probably not even going to be part of the video. I'm going to be coaching them how to do that, but it's so much fun, man. It's so much fun. But that's going to be really emphasizing that shore fishing element, really doubling down like, hey, and fishing on the river a lot. We're going to do a lot of, we're going to call it the gato series, where it's gato means cat. So fishing for catfish.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to have one specifically for La Serie de Gatos. So we're going to be specifically fishing for catfish.
Yeah, because that's mostly what I've done has been river fishing.
Yeah, it's fun.
In the summer. But yeah, that's one thing for me specifically is that whole thing of the barrier to entry because I don't have a boat. And it's like there's shore fishing, but no, it's also comes down to as well that I'm not big on fishing. Like that's
Sure.
and you know everybody's got their thing.
Everyone's got their thing, yeah.
But I think attracting people and getting them to try it out, and then eventually out of those people, right, a certain amount is going to go like, holy cow, this is addicting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'd love to take you out, man. And if you want to fish the river, oh man, it's not uncommon that we can catch literally from Boom Island, from that stretch. It's not uncommon that we each can catch anywhere between 30 and 40 fish.
wow.
Smallmouth bass, specifically targeting smallmouth bass.
And you were talking about the use of lures and the colors.
The colors, yep.
And in your podcast, you were mentioning some, what's the word? Analogies that I had never even thought of for fish. And like you were saying, like, well, if your aunt is going to the store, she might just go and look around, and then she comes back and is like, yeah, I didn't really buy anything. She just spent 3 hours, 4 hours just shopping for nothing.
For nothing.
And you said fish are the same way. Sometimes they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of go around and
Or sit still, move around.
yeah, I'm just here, and I had never heard something like that. But to me, I'm just like, holy cow, like that makes total sense. Like, no, it just clicked.
It is, man. Like there's I don't know, the angler, forgot, I think his name is Boyd Duckett. He has a cat, and or his wife has cats, and he's like, you know, you ever come home and your cat, you know, you shake your foot or you have a little thing and then the cat attacks it. You just shake something like a little, whatever it is, a string or, and all of a sudden the freaking the cat just lunges, and it's so playful, and it's going, everything you're doing, you have a little laser and it's attacking the laser, you know, like everything you're doing, everything. The next day you try to do the same thing, grab the feather, and he's just looking at you.
Not interested.
What are you doing? Why do you have that feather in my face for? And he just leaves. And you're like, hey man, what happened? I thought you don't want to play. Fish are the same way. It's about their attitude. And a lot of things change their attitude. Their ecosystem, water temperature, moon phase, bug hatches. And then you mix all that up in one situation. Maybe just one, maybe two, maybe three different variables, but sometimes you have all of them. And it changes the whole dynamic of like you and I can go out tomorrow and catch 50 fish each. But all of a sudden you have a Canadian front from Canada comes in, and it goes from 75 like right now to it goes to, I mean, it just drops, right? It just drops.
You mean a cold front?
The cold front, yeah.
Okay.
The cold front comes in and it changes the weather. And all of a sudden we go back out and like, it's a little chilly, and just put on the hoodie. And we can't do anything right. We can't get bit. That happens a lot. That happens all the time in fishing. That's fishing. That's literally what fishing is. It's like going out there. And that's the thing that I was talking to my pro staff. The number one mistake that people always make is they fish history. They fish history. They go to the same spot under the same conditions. You need the same lure. Well, everything has changed. The moon phase changed. The water temperature changed. The air pressure changed. The air, the temperature of the air changed. Everything changed.
Those things affect
Everything.
fish
It's
behavior.
really cloudy now. Yeah. Everything changed. But we are very arrogant as human beings. Like, oh man, this is the honey hole. This is it, man. And all of a sudden, you're just like, you're scratching your head. You're like, man, I don't know what's going on. And people are looking at you like, hey, I thought you were this big Mr. Fisherman guy. What's going on? And it has nothing to do. We've been on top of fish. The boats that we have now, the technology. You could be right on top of them and still not be able to catch them. That happens.
Oh.
Talk to walleye guys. They'll tell you. Those guys will tell you. Gals will tell you. You could run bait right by them and they won't even. They're like, yeah, get that thing away from me.
Freaking fish just swimming.
Yeah.
Swimming. He's just like,
Yeah, I'm good.
I don't give a rat's ass.
Yeah, pretty much.
Go.
Pretty much. It's very, very, very. It's maddening, dude. It's maddening. It's you go to the range, you get a new projectiles, right? You put them in, and you're just center mass the whole time. You're like, wow, man, I love these new Federal whatever, Remington whatever. Week goes by, you bring your buddy, man, you got to try these. All of a sudden, you can't. You're hitting left, you're hitting right, you're hitting bottom. It happens sometimes, man. It happens. Why it happens? I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it happens. You know what I mean? I know it's happened to me. Maybe I'm inconsistent. Maybe I dropped the scope. I don't know, but it's happened to me. It happens. Maybe it happens in fishing more than it does in shooting, and practicing. But it's happened to me.
So, what would be? Oh, obviously, you just mentioned that you're working on this. What would be some things to point out to the Latino community about getting into fishing? Like very fundamental things about it.
The first thing is fish around where you live.
Okay.
And here's why. Don't listen to people that you got to go to this lake because it's amazing. Yeah, that may be true, but you're going to waste a lot of time in your travel. The more you can be out on the water, the better. Meaning the faster you can get there, the longer you stay there and fish, the more you're going to learn. More time on the water. When I started doing jiu-jitsu, I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Where at?
Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. Big shout out to those guys. And I started at the Warriors Cove. Then I went to Cali Group with Rick Fay, and then I'm with Greg Nelson over at the.
You were with Greg Nelson.
Yeah.
I trained for 6 years.
Yeah, he's awesome, man.
Not there, but we were under Pedro Sauer as well.
Oh, absolutely, man. Pedro Sauer is great. But you know how jiu-jitsu is? You don't get good for a long time. I mean, it takes hundreds of hours. It takes you going to the gym 3-4 times and getting smashed just to get a little bit good, right? Mm-hmm. You get checked. Let's just say you go and you're like murderous roll. You start rolling, and you get tapped 10 times. You're like, all right, man, I only got tapped 10 times today. The next, a month from now, hey, I only got tapped 9 times. Well, because you spend a lot of time on the mat practicing. That's the only way you get good at it. How do you get good at the range? You got to go to the range and shoot. You want to get good at fishing, you got to get on the lake and you have to cast. You have to be out there, and specifically more in fishing, because you can't control the weather, man. You can't. You probably heard this advice when you're doing jiu-jitsu: roll with everyone, right? Big, small, tall, skinny, fat, muscular. You got to feel the way other people feel. That's how you get good. Excuse me. Fishing is no different. Fishing, every weather component that's different as your opponent. That's your adversity. You know, that's the way I always look at it when fronts come in or when a moon phase, when a bug hatch. I'm like, oh man, I got to make that adjustment. I got to do this now. I got to do that. You know what I mean? It's not controlled. It's out of control. And your job is to decipher it, do your best to concentrate and be in the moment and say, I notice there's a lot of bugs around. And you look at the moon phase and you're like, well, yep, that makes sense, because we know that bug hatches, whatever the hatch is, always happen on full moons and new moons.
I'm not even following it right now.
So when you look at an ecosystem, like, you know what a mayfly is? It's like a little, or mosquitoes or flies.
Okay.
So when the circadian rhythm of just the Earth, of the world, of ecosystems, it goes on a calendric system, like calendric or certificate, like on the moon. Everything's on the moon phase.
Oh, okay, on the moon cycle.
On the moon cycle, moon cycle. Excuse me. I always say moon phase, but probably better to say moon cycle. So when fish set up to spawn, it's always on the new moon, full moon. But you also need proper water temperature too. If you have one and not the other, it doesn't happen.
Huh.
How are you gonna make you need the peanut butter and the jelly to make a peanut butter PB&J sandwich.
So the fish don't hatch.
Well, a fish will actually have a harder time just trying to spawn because it's too cold, right? Let's just say it's too cold. Let's say it's a full moon. It's like, man, it's great, but the water's too cold. So it's got to wait for the next moon cycle. See if the water warms up. And not all fish are like, hey, everyone, it's the new moon. Let's go. It doesn't work like that. They go in waves, and we can do later on, we can do a whole show just on that, and how that affects ecosystems.
That would be very interesting, because I had never even heard of that before.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
I just thought that fish just kind of went, got it on, all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm about to lay some, and just fish are born.
Yeah, it's cool to see, but yeah, it's their circadian rhythm. It's basically that. It's connected to the moon phase or the moon cycle, So it's really fascinating stuff, man. Really fascinating stuff. Yeah, it's cool stuff, man. Cool stuff.
A lot of nature is, everything in nature is just connected to something else. Like everything is just together, and like humans are no different. Humans are, because you work overnight. Most people can't. They're going to struggle with.
No, that's a good point, because it affects your own circadian rhythm. As a human, like people that are are nurses or police officers that work, they sleep during the day, which they lack then vitamin D, right? Yep. And we know vitamin D enters through the retina of the eye. That sunlight produces that essential vitamin D in the body. But if you're sleeping during the day and you don't get enough sunlight, and then you wake up and then you're on the night shift, you're going to have a lack of vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And that's going to affect your hormone levels and your circadian rhythm. So it definitely does affect a lot of different things.
That, and I'm a huge believer in that nature is necessary to human beings. And what I mean by that is like going out in nature and actually like walking through the woods or going out on a lake, or just being away from the artificial creation of humans for like buildings and roads and all this. Just get away from all that, go out, and it has a healing effect on humans. And actually, I have read that in multiple books from psychologists. Robert Greene, I think, talked about it.
Oh yeah,
I think he did. And then
he's in a lot of podcasts.
Yeah,
that dude's he's a brilliant dude, man.
Yeah, he's one of his strategies is to in the book 33 Strategies of War. One of the strategies he uses is just to go on every podcast that he can, whether it's small or big. Like I've seen him go with guys who have only 500 subscribers. And
probably less than that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've seen him go on there and like some young kid who's like trying to get a podcast started. And he's like, well, let's get it on, and then like they'll chat and whatnot, and
That's
that,
incredible.
yeah. But that's one of his. When you read that book, 33 Strategies of War, that is one of the strategies that he uses from there.
Yeah.
There are multiple strategies that he uses out of that book.
One of many.
Yep. But yeah, I think him and Doctor, I can't even pronounce his name, this Indian doctor, and a few others that have mentioned that, hey, once you go out on nature, like he has this healing effect. That's why now some hospitals, like they'll have these large windows, and as a person is sitting there, they'll have plants and kind of a view out into nature, and it's like just this very primitive thing that we have inside of us, and it's necessary, like we need it.
Yeah, you're right, man. I was in Vegas for my buddy's wedding, and Justin Choi, I love you, bro. Big shout out to him and his beautiful wife and his parents. He lives in Chicago. I went to high school with that guy. We got into a lot of trouble, but he's a good dude. He's a really great guy. But the reason why I'm bringing that up and him up is I went to Vegas for his wedding. And I was there for 4 days. I hadn't been to Vegas in a long time prior to that. I was in college the last time I had went. When I got back, I was not right. I didn't feel right. It was overstimulation of sound, of glittering lights, of everything. It's completely artificial, And we partied pretty hard. I'm not gonna lie. We got down. We partied pretty hard, and I was with one of my best friends, Fabian Solis, and I'm just not used to that. I'm used to being barefoot on the deck of my boat with the sun to my back and the wind in my face. You know what I mean? That's my church. That's my office. And it took me a while to get off tilt, to get back to kind of normal from that. And I really noticed that. So what you're saying is 100% accurate.
And the other thing is, do you consider yourself more on the introverted spectrum or extroverted expression? I'm taking my guess, and I want to see if I'm right.
Probably more on the extroverted.
I was thinking more the introverted.
I can be, because I'm a very private person. However, I love people, man. I love people. Fascinate me. I'm very curious. I can talk to anybody. One of the best compliments I ever got was from an ex-partner of mine. She told me, if you walked into a Ku Klux Klan meeting by accident, you'd probably make friends with those guys.
It's like the black guy that was. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but he was like dressing up himself as KKK, and like going into the meetings.
Oh, they didn't make a movie. I think they made a movie out of that too. Yeah, and I know this guy, Dave Chappelle, made a sketch off of that.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle.
Clayton Bigsby, great sketch. It pissed a lot of people off, mostly in the black community. But the community has to admit that was really funny, man. That was a funny sketch. But
he's a comedian.
He's a comedian. He wants to push the envelope. But no, I would say definitely on the extroverted side, and I like to be when I'm home. Just keep to myself.
For me, like I'm more in the introverted side, and like I really enjoy being alone when I'm out in nature. Like,
sure,
that's my thing.
Sure.
Like going out with people, it's fun, and I'm not on an extreme side of introversion. I'm just like more on this side here.
Yeah, sure.
But other people that I know who are a couple people I know, not just a few, more than a couple, who are obsessed with fishing. They're very much on the introverted side, and they just love going out and spending time casting, just out in nature. And so I don't know if there is a
correlation.
Maybe?
I think there may be. I think I never really thought about that, but you're right, because it's an individual sport. When you look at it, I mean, when you team up, you just have one more person with you. When you do a team, like a tournament, you do a partner tournament, it's just you and somebody else. which is not a lot of people, right? It's just you and somebody else. But fishing at the professional level is usually individual, all the time. 8 hours by yourself.
A lot of thinking
Yep.
and analyzing.
Yes, yes. A lot of downloading.
So, I'm curious about this because snipers. My understanding is that the majority, if not all, snipers at the top level are introverts.
It wouldn't surprise me.
What's his name? There's a guy.
Kyle, was it Kyle, the guy they made the movie of?
There's a guy on YouTube who's this black guy. I can't remember.
Does he have dreads?
Yep.
Yeah, he was on Patrick PBD. Patrick.
Yep. He was.
Patrick's podcast. I saw just highlights of it, and you're right. Very quiet dude. Very confident.
He was saying that the majority are more in the analytical, introverted spectrum, and that's because it's a lot of analyzing and just really thinking. Like you think a lot. And like it's just your mind is just constantly thinking.
That's interesting.
That's why it made me curious about fishing and hunting, because I'm thinking, well, is it possible that people are maybe more introverted because it's a solo sport? I don't know.
It's a great question. It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me that folks from that community were, introverted, because it is a solitary sport. At the end of the day, when you look at it, you're really by yourself. I do my best fishing by myself. Not that I don't do really good fishing with my staff. I took a couple of my staff out, and one of my staff, she got a 5+ largemouth bass. It's on Instagram. It's enormous. We caught it on the Z-Man chatterbait. Z-Man, if you're watching this, please holler at me. I'm going to send you some emails. They got amazing product. I'd love to partner with them. They're great. And they're a great organization, great business. But we use a lot of their chatterbaits. That's what we were primarily using that day. We were on De Macasca, which is now formerly, that's what they call, formerly known as Lake Calhoun. Thank you. And it's one of my favorite lakes because it's really close and it's just loaded. Loaded with trophy fish. And it's not a secret. I mean,
I didn't know this.
It's getting more and more popular.
I thought the complete opposite. I would have thought that lake being inner city, like in the heart of the city, almost would be empty.
Well, the PBS, when the PBS guy, Brad Edmondson, he's shout out to Brad and the folks at PBS and stuff. They're great people over there, and he's doing a great job. He does an amazing job in the fishing and hunting community. He's amazing. That dude's awesome. But he couldn't believe it. We missed a muskie. We caught some nice bass, some northerns. Yeah.
In Lake Calhoun, I mean...
De Macasca. There was a gentleman... It was in June. I want to say in June or July. No, it was June, May or June. So we PBS, we did that special there. But there was a gentleman... that caught a muskie. I think the muskie was 50 something inches. He was in a kayak, and it wasn't a record, but it was huge. In the spring, my good friend and I, Justin Galbraith, big shout out to him. He's a big angler as well, and he's part of our staff. And he's a pike expert, pike guy. He loves fishing for pike, and we saw in what we saw with our own eyes, a record number of pike. And you see, this happens a lot in the spring because the water's warming up. Remember, we had a long winter. We had a very long winter. And when we went out there fishing, it might have been for opener or the weekend. I think it was for opener. There was a giant fish everywhere. 45 to 55 inch fish in that lake. Just enormous, man.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you'll see more of that. You're going to see probably the next, and we've been talking about this for a few years at the DNR. We talked about this. We feel, and I'm not part of that organization anymore, that agency, but at the time we felt that the next record fish, whether muskie, northern pike, or bass, would come from one of the 13 Minneapolis metro lakes or 11 metro lakes in St. Paul.
Wow.
It's possible because they're not as pressured, and accessibility too. When you go to Calhoun or Demarcasca, you have to park on the street. They have one boat. They have a boat launch, and it closes on the 10th. So very limited time, and so the opportunities are less. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's no like huge like you go to Lake Minnetonka, man, they got huge parking lots for you and your boat and stuff.
Yep.
Medicine Lake, same thing.
They fill up.
But you go to Harriet or go to Nokomis, Harriet, or Calhoun. There's no. I mean, Harriet has a small parking lot. I think you have maybe 8 spots,
Wow.
if that. So that's what I mean. Like the next, I've caught 5+ pound bass, and I love fishing for bass, you know. But I've caught. I mean, my buddy Tim Daly, he's caught 26, 27-inch walleyes out of Harriet. Huge walleyes.
That's huge.
That people are like, oh man, you know. And I'm like, you don't have to go all the way to Canada. Just go down the street, man. go to Joe's, get yourself some jumbo leeches, and go to the dock.
So that goes back to what you're saying of the advice to anybody getting into fishing. The whole thing of go to your local water source.
Yes.
Lake or
Yes.
body of water.
100%.
That makes a lot of sense. Now.
It's get to know it. Get a map. The DNR has a lake finder. We talked about it in our last podcast, you know, and we talked a little bit about that. And it's free. It's a free app. You know, download it. I don't think you download it. You just go to their website and you can just have it on your phone.
Yeah.
Local's good. Local shop local, fish local.
Because my main thing is for fishing is ice fishing.
Yeah.
Now that's what I in the winter I go ice fishing a lot, and usually I'll make my trip out to Mille Lacs. Mille Lacs is about a couple hours from here. It's a couple hour drive for me.
Yeah, hour and a half, hour, depending on the traffic, so 2 hours. Yep.
Yep. And then on top of that, you get onto the lake, and then you're driving slow, and it's like another 45 minutes drive on the lake to my spot.
If people don't understand that too, man, like it's a lot of driving for ice fishing. Absolutely.
Yep, especially where I go.
Yeah.
And I go, and then like, for example, this year where it was just horrible.
Oh, so sorry.
Where I was just horrible. I'm just thinking like, it was very annoying because it was super windy. I mean, it was so bad that my truck was buried in snow, and I had to I always carry a shovel with me everywhere I go. So I had to shovel my truck out of the snow, from the snow drift, because it buried my truck. And I was having issues with the heater, and it was like -10 degrees, and it was just like I couldn't even sleep right. Usually when I go, I stay 2-3 days out there.
Sure.
That's my thing. And then at some point, I just like, I'm tired of this. I have a lake close to here, only about 10-minute drive tops.
You're talking about
Bald Eagle.
Oh, Bald Eagle. Okay, what's the other one that the city uses for water?
Vadnais Lake.
Vadnais. Dude, there's some huge walleyes out of there. Holy
Vadnais Lake?
shit! Yeah,
I've thought of fishing that one, and I never have.
Man, let me tell you something. The Southeast Asian community, they got that lake figured out. Oh yeah, I went on there bass fishing years ago, 10+ years ago. And just because you could only fish on the bank, you don't allow boats on there, not even kayaks. You cannot put anything that floats on that lake. So in the spring, it's loaded with people because the walleyes are shallow in the spring. They're spawning. They're shallow. They come in to spawn and they hang out because all the bait fish are there. The crayfish, bait fish, all kinds of other fish are spawning. Bluegills, perch, bass, and they gorge on those things, you know. But I've seen people pull 22s, 25s, and maybe by inches. Huge walleyes out of there, dude.
That's...
Huge.
Huh.
So you,
you got me, man. I want to have to check out that.
well, dude,
place.
let's do a show. Let's do a show where you and I go there. We'll bring some equipment. We'll go early in the year when walleye opens. We'll go out there with some sucker minnows, some leeches, and just sit down, have a couple of brewskis, and record. And you'll see we'll catch, and we'll do it early in the morning, and we could also do it at night. You know. That's when the bite's a little bit better because walleye are crepuscular, which means they light.
Somebody just told me that
About deer, the same thing. Deer.
What is it?
Crepuscular.
Crepuscular.
Yeah.
Crepuscular.
Yeah. Crepusculars are sentient beings that just are low. They're more active in low light conditions. Walleye being one of them. Deer being another one. Raccoons, you know. Yeah. Possums and stuff like that, yeah. Crepuscular.
Yeah, no, I'm totally up to it.
Let's do it, man.
Cause I don't know anybody who ice fishes anymore.
Because I don't think you can ice fish on Vadnais either.
You can't?
No, I don't think. Well, they locked the gate, so you can't even get in there.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a. I think there's a certain amount of. They limit it to people, but I'm telling you, if we can get in there. We should. Yeah. We should definitely. It'll be fun.
My lake that I go here, Bald Eagle, when I go, it's like, compared to Mille Lacs, I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go there. And I never stay there overnight. I'm just like...
Yeah, just go for a little bit.
Yeah, let's go in the morning and then...
And everyone's on that point. On that point, that big point that comes out. On Bald Eagle, if that's the one you're talking about, there's an island, and then there's like a I don't know if it's a sandbar, but it's a point that comes out quite a bit.
Oh yeah. I know. What
everybody's there. Yep. Everyone sets up right there, dude.
So
yeah,
almost every spot that I've been to that lake, every single time I go there, it's just non-stop sunnies, sometimes walleyes.
Really nice.
Yeah, and to me, it's just like. I go to Mille Lacs, and I'm driving
2 hours.
This time,
2 hours.
And then like I catch nothing, and it's miserable. And usually I'll go find a spot where I'm like, it's just myself and my dogs, because I want to have them have freedom to just go run around and not bother people.
Yep.
And like this year, I get there, find my spot. It's like freaking Wednesday. I'm picking this day specifically because, hey, everybody's working, right? So I'm here alone in a spot where, like, I'm probably not even gonna catch anything because it sucks. And then all of a sudden, I see this freaking guy with this
snowmobile or something.
No, huge castle.
Ice castle.
Oh no! And he parks like a few feet away from me, yards. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me, dude?" And all of a sudden. Another guy is like, oh my god, that's where the fish are. And he comes with his ice castle and he parks on the other side of me. And I'm just like, you guys, like, look at your maps. I'm in a horrible spot on purpose because my dogs it's a beautiful day, it's 30 degrees, and they're out running.
Yeah.
And sure enough, as soon as they got there, it's like my dogs are like, oh my god, people, ice castle. So they start running and being all curious and whatnot.
Engaging with the other folks.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, well, now you just added pressure to the nothing that I had here. And then I go to Bald Eagle, and it's just like, make a hole, random hole, and it's just like, bloop, bloop, bloop.
Yeah, just pounding them. Yep. Just hammering the fish. Yeah. So, it's funny how that works, man. You know, it really is.
And I've had people ask me, that they want to go ice fish, or they told me that I want to go fishing.
Sure.
Like, let me know when you're going to go fishing so I can go with you. Because they want to get into it. And I'm like, dude, it's not until the winter. And my ice house, it can accommodate multiple people. But I was like, just be prepared that it's going to be cold. And if we go to Mille Lacs, just be prepared that we're going to be out there a couple days, 2 to 3 days. Because I don't make it a 1 day thing when I go further. When I go to a local lake, like you said, yeah, I utilize all that time, and then I can just pack up and go home.
Yeah, it's so close to you.
So
You know,
close. Yep.
very practical. In and out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, fishing your local lake, getting to know it really well. Yeah, I got a buddy who lives right by Nokomis. So he fishes that Nokomis Lake, and I think what's the other one? Is it Minnehaha Lake in Minneapolis? So he fishes those lakes a lot. So he knows those lakes really well, especially from the shore because he's a shore. He doesn't have a boat. But the other thing I was going to tell you is that, like, when talking to the staff about the strategy for next year, definitely a lot of content on shore fishing from local lakes and river. But also, what's in the recent years has gotten really hot, and I was doing this years ago, and I'm not taking credit, but this is before I had a boat, kayak fishing. So Joe's has, they say, hey, if you want a kayak, you can use, one of ours. So we're going to be doing that because I think that's another very approachable way for folks in the community to get out fishing. And okay, so you're going to drop $500 on a kayak, 400, 600, whatever you want to spend. That's a lot. Trust me, that's a lot cheaper than a $30,000, $40,000 boat.
Yep.
Plus insurance. So.
And it's kind of like one of the reasons I like ice fishing a lot as well is because of the cost to entry, the cost to get into it. It's not a lot. Like, okay, yeah, you when I started with a hand auger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks, but you'll make a whole.
You get in shape.
So my very first auger, right, that I had, because I had gone ice fishing with other people, and then finally when I went out on my own, I was like, okay, so I get my hand auger, make my hole, and then I'm like, okay, I'm reaching water because I can see slush, and I was like, I gave it a couple taps into it. And then my auger just falls into the water. And it was the deepest point of that lake. It was like 35 feet. And I'm just like, I'm just holding on to
the handle.
Oh, no. And I don't have my auger anymore. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I want to fish this spot. And it was like a horrible spot. I fished 0 fish that day.
Yeah, wow.
And I lost my auger. I was just like, okay, that was stupid. I didn't know you had to put a pin in it. The pin comes in the box, and I just was like, hey, whatever. I don't know what that thing is for. Screw it.
Oh my god. No, I was gonna say big shout out to Joe Falkowski from Shell's Brewing Company. There's a story. He's one of the. I know we're going like all these different, which I love in a podcast because you can talk about so many different things. But you're talking about your auger falling. Joe Falkowski is one of the best. Like when it comes to beer. That dude is like the Elon Musk of beer. Like that guy is a genius. He's like unbelievably smart, But I have another buddy, Derek Johnson, also in the beer industry. They were fishing one time, and he told me the story that they were all excited. They were, like, all right, man, finally fishing. And Joe Falkowski had his rod, and first cast, whoosh, there goes the rod and reel. And in his hand, it was just like the butt of the rod, the handle, and everything else went with it on the first cast. And it happens, man. Stuff like that happens. So they always give him a hard time about that. Stuff like that's happened to me. I remember buying when Gander Mountain was around. You remember Gander Mountain? I bought a nice rod and reel from them, and I think it was like the first few times I used it, it slipped out of my hand. And went in the lake. We were fishing at about 6 foot of water, maybe not even that deep. And we're using crankbaits to try to get it out. Couldn't get it out, so it happens.
Yeah,
it happens, man. It
makes good stories though, and you remember those, and you're like, yeah, that sucked.
It does. It does. It sucks. And you're right. At the moment, you're like, God damn it. But it's funny, man. It's funny. And
the moment sucks, but then you're like, oh, that was funny.
You remember that? Hey, dude, you remember when? And then you're like, oh, yeah, I remember when.
Yeah. Well, Ray, I think we're going to wrap it up right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. This has been great, man.
You answered all the questions that I had. I had been
Appreciate
thinking about all this stuff, and
Thank you.
it's a great thing that you're doing with the community.
Thank you.
And
I really appreciate it. We really do.
I think you're right. I think those people who listen to your message, or those companies that listen to your message, will see a massive explosion. And I hope that those that listened benefit from it.
I hope so. I think it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, if they're in the business of making great products for anglers, they're in the business of selling that great product to anglers. We have the delivery system, the bridge, to connect them to markets that they normally don't market to or sell to. Mm-hmm. And it's just I think these companies, whether they're big or small, I think the bigger ones it's going to take more time, like you were saying, because they're so big, you know. But I think there's opportunity everywhere, and I hope and that's the only thing I can do is work hard to try to connect with them, because it's not easy. I'm not going to lie, it's challenging to get a hold of folks in that industry. It really is. However, we're open to conversation, you know, with them, and you know we want to have fun. We want to help them sell more product. And the reason why that means a lot to me is because I like when people have good stuff. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Good quality product, you know, that's made well with integrity, and it catches fish. You know what I mean? It just catches fish. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this in your platform, because not that I don't talk about it on my platform. We do. Maybe we brought it up. I'm not sure, but this is a great opportunity. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. And we hope to work more with communities, and I hope you know, maybe in the future, you know, you can have us on again if you want some other pro staff. I'd be happy to. Yeah, happy to assist you.
Totally open. And yeah, like you said, going out to do events, or not events, but like an episode on something.
Yeah,
I'm very.
That'd be cool.
Very open to that.
That would be awesome, man. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And thank you guys for tuning in. Signing out.